Welcome to my channel. Here, I don't just speak, but I invite you to think. Throughout my videos, I've questioned the deepest held beliefs, from philosophy, the dynamics of religion and faith, to personal identity. I ventured into the controversial because I know that only in honest, critical confrontation do we grow. My voice is a search for truth, unafraid of what is difficult. If you join this community today, you don't just watch, but you engage. Together, we open the door to a courageous dialogue, one that transforms us. Subscribe, share, and let's keep questioning, growing, and seeking truth together. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. So nice to have you here. Just doing a little bit of a housekeeping, kind of getting myself ready. Take this off. Dr. Carrier is with us. He's in the backstage. I've got Dr. Pires is on the way as far as I know, but hasn't arrived yet. So I'll see what the confusion is there. Dr. Carrier and I might just carry on the show by ourselves. We'll see. I'm sure we have a lot to talk about. As you know, excuse me, I'm still dealing with this some kind of congestion issue. So you'll have to bear with me. I do apologize. I think Dr. Carrier mentioned he's also got some allergies he's dealing with. Do the best we can to, keep it smooth here today. At any rate, as all of you who know who watch my channel, I am a very big fan of this guest I'm having on here today, Dr. Richard Carrier. I've cited his work in several debates that I've done regarding my views on objective morality. I've also referenced his work in informal debates or discussions I've had with Christians regarding the book of Daniel in particular and the historical errors there. I've been a fan of Dr. Carrier's looking at his position on mythicism, which he's probably most famous for, I suppose. And I'm really, really glad to see that the mythicist position is actually being taken a lot more seriously. Scholarship is kind of, I think, starting to catch up to this view. I think those arguments are so solid. So I'm not necessarily a mythicist or historicist because I just don't see it being even really that important because I just don't take these religious claims seriously. So if there's no supernatural element to the Jesus story, then it just doesn't really mean that much to me. We can look at the Bible as a work of literature. And if you just look at it as a work of literature, it could be really a great book, actually. I think the book of Proverbs is one of my favorite books of all literature I've read. It's really beautiful poetry. I actually like the book of Daniel, if you take it for what it is, as a piece of literature. And especially if you take it in the context with the Maccabean revolt and use this kind of like, a propaganda piece and you look into the actual history of it and stuff. But even if you just take the stories as what they are, like you've got the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the fiery furnace, and you've got Daniel in the lion's den. And there's just so much going on in that narration. So if you take the Bible for what it is, you can appreciate it and enjoy it. But if you're taking this stuff seriously from a scholarly viewpoint, I think the mythicist position needs to be seriously considered and seriously looked at, because when you actually look at the evidence we have for the historical Jesus, it's very thin. So anyway, as you all know, Dr. Carrier, by his work, I'm going to bring him up on stage, let him introduce himself, and then we're going to get into today's topic, which is talking about AI and morality. So really looking forward to getting into that. Dr. Carrier, it's such an honor for me to be able to share the stage with you. As like I said, I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm sorry, but I'm just such a big fan. So I just really appreciate any time you're willing to stop by the channel. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Glad to be here. And this is definitely an interesting topic. So I think, until Dr. Pires shows up, what I had in mind was to talk about what it even is that we're talking about, right? So I don't know did you have an opening question or did you want me to just go into like, what do we even mean by AI in this conversation?
All right, I was trying to email Dr. Pires here to see if he is actually planning on joining us here. I know I sent him a link, and I think he might be confused. So I think it probably would be a good idea to separate the AI from, like, as you mentioned, when we're talking about AI and its uses versus what the everyday person is thinking with the LLM and how it gets used and the massive amount of waste in energy and resources that everyday AI is being used for. But let's help the audience by parsing that out. And then I'd also like you to take some time. Oh, I think this is Dr. Pires here. Here we go. Excellent. Okay. So, well, Dr.
Hey.
Perez, so good to see you, brother. I'm so
Yes,
glad I was
I
just trying to email you, and yeah, you figured it out on your own. Good stuff. Okay,
I
so
was waiting.
before we get into what Dr. Carey, before you answer that, let me
Yeah.
let Dr. Perez introduce himself to the audience, and then Dr. Perez, you'll kind of catch up to the conversation as we go along here, okay? But feel free, Dr. Perez, tell people who you are and what you're about and where they can find you. I've got your guys' links in the description, of course, and then we're going to get into talking about AI, what it actually is, comparatively speaking, and then we're going to have each of you gentlemen give your views on morality. I know Dr. Carey's position fairly well because I've studied it, but I haven't really heard your position laid out. So we'll come to kind of an understanding of where we're each coming from with the topic of morality itself. And then what we're going to do is we're going to map that on to AI. So, Dr. Perez, do you want to just introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. First of all, Leroy, thanks a lot for having me here. I'm very glad to have the second opportunity to talk to Richard Carey. He was in my channel. You were in my channel, so it was a big pleasure. I was in the backstage waiting. I don't know what happened. Maybe there a misunderstanding of the link. So to make a very short introduction about myself, I have a PhD in bioinformatics. I have almost 2 decades working with artificial intelligence. I'm not a philosopher. I'm bioinformatician. I got interested about lately about the morality, atheism, and then I came across some work of Richard Carey, especially he sent me by mail. You have some discussion by mail. Then he sent me this case that this debate that he had with Christopher DiCarlo. I think it was 2019, and I got interested because we start to exchange some email. So that's how I got interested in this topic of AI in morality. But the topic of morality by itself is very old in my life. I do have some lives in which I talk with people from bioinformatics. It's a very old problem, as I talked with Dr. Carol by email. If a medical doctor make a mistake, who's supposed to be blamed? The algorithm, or the medical doctor? So that I hope that we can expand this discussion here. So thanks a lot again for having me here, Leroy, for organizing the event.
Oh, it's such an honor to have you here, brother. I really, I was so grateful that you reached out to me to allow me to kind of share my own views on morality from a secular viewpoint. I think it's an important conversation to have, like you and I discussed on your channel, and it was a pleasure to be there because the atheists are just vilified, out there, but by not having access, quote unquote, to morality and all this nonsense that the theists are throwing at us. And we all have access to morality because we all have empathy, right? The normative, in the normative sense. There are, of course, some psychopaths that don't have access to this kind of thing, but for the normal everyday person, we have empathy. We have the ability to use reason, right, to understand goals and what it takes to achieve these goals. We're a social species. That's how we evolved. So we actually have a motivation and a logical reason both to try and attain this goal of cooperation and work together. Once we understand this goal, then we have true facts that lead us to this goal. And it was such an honor to be able to come and speak to you about my views on morality. And I think what I'd like to do, and I was just getting ready to jump into this right before you joined, and I apologize for any confusion. I'm glad you figured out the link because I'm really glad to have you here. I think that what we'd like to do is go ahead and we'll start, I guess, with Dr. Carrier, and then we'll go to you, Dr. Perez, and I'd like you to each lay out your foundation for morality so that people can understand where we're coming from, and then we're going to map that onto AI. And I think what you might do, Dr. Carrier, also is give people the understanding the difference between what AI and LLM and how that all works.
Yeah, especially if Dr. Perez wants to bring up ethical questions about current AI. So, for instance, that particular scenario of who gets blamed, right, when the current systems fail, that's a legitimate area of conversation as well. So maybe we'll talk about both kinds, but I want to make sure the audience understands that there's two different kinds of AI that we're talking about here. Artificial intelligence actually has been around, like actual working AI has been around for like 20, 30 years, right? The latest sort of like crazed version of it that is eating up data centers and is in the news and everything is a particular kind of thing called a large language model. Even when they're doing imagery like photos and video, it uses the same kind of process. it's more of an automator than a thinker. The thing itself never actually understands anything it's doing. It doesn't have consciousness, and this results in it making a lot of weird mistakes when it does its work. And so it has its uses, but unfortunately, it's extremely energy intensive. In fact, to the point that if you price it correctly, like right now, it's still not priced for what it's actually costs. The AI companies are underpricing it, eating the losses to build customers. But the actual cost is so high that a lot of managers now are realizing that humans are cheaper than this. And if you compare the amount of energy it takes to run one of these models compared to a human brain, which is just like 20 watts, we can get human consciousness for a lot less energy. This is like you burning tons and tons of energy. It's like asking someone to build a skyscraper without power tools. It's going to be way more wasteful than like doing it with the proper tech. So that's its own problem, right? So the LLM, what's called AI in the public right now, is that LLM system. And that has its issues to talk about all on its own, like especially if we're using it for medical diagnosis or medical procedures, driving cars on freeways and things like that. That's got its own thing. The thing itself, of course, doesn't have consciousness, so it's not an agent. So it can't be blamed, but its manufacturers can be. And I would think, like, when we're going to deal with that, when we get to that, talking about that kind of subject, we should treat it, in my opinion, just like a drug. Like you administer a pill or a drug to someone and it has side effects. Oh, it's going to fail at a certain rate. It's going to cause side effects at a certain rate. It might kill you at a certain rate, right? It's just like that. So the same ethical reasoning that would decide on, do we apply this drug knowing all the weird shit that it can do or not? And that comes down to the manufacturer, the pharmaceutical company. Is it a safe product or not? And it comes down to the doctors. Like, okay, like I know the risks, but this patient is doomed unless we take on those risks or something. So there could be those kinds of decisions. The AI itself is not an agent, so we can't blame it for anything, and there isn't any way to punish it. I mean, there's nothing we can do about that. However, there's another kind of AI that is what a lot of people used to talk about and really wanted, and is a thing that AI companies are claiming they're going to get to, but they won't. Their model won't succeed. There are a few very undercapitalized companies and groups that are still working on real AI. And real AI, which we might call AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, that is something that will manifest when it becomes self-aware. And not just self-aware, but also aware of what it's talking about. Like, it understands what's happening and what it's doing. And that matters for, like, causal reasoning. And that's kind of one of the more important things. Is rather than statistical guessing, it's actual causal reasoning. And right now, like, so we have Lacan and various other researchers who are working on model building, building these things as model builders. The idea is you train it to build a model of the environment and navigate that environment using the model. And then the next step would be to get it to do causal modeling, so it can model causation in the system. The next step would be causal modeling of other minds. So there's like intentional agents moving around, humans, animals, and it can like figure out, causally model what's going on in their heads and then predict what they're going to do or whatever. And then the next step would be to take that engine and turn it on itself so that it's building a causal model of itself. And once you get to that point, now it knows what words mean and what they refer to, because it can refer them to some sort of visual or 3D model or some sort of causal model. It knows what those things mean, and therefore it can do things and fix its own mistakes in a way that current LLM systems can't. Now, here's the thing, is that, in my opinion, once you're there, once you've gotten to that point, you have a person, right? Like even more than an animal, you've got a personal consciousness. In between, on the way there, we're going to build animal consciousnesses first. So I think, like, Waymo versus Tesla, the Waymo effort to build auto-driving cars is to have the cars model their environment and figure out how to navigate the environment using the model. That's much closer to what an animal mind does. And so I think Waymo's close to, if they haven't already gotten there, building synthetic animal minds. And if they get to the point, or someone else gets to the point of building a self-conscious one of these, then it's going to be even more intelligent and aware than like an ape, for example. You have a person, so that creates moral obligations of how you treat it, and also like how you interact with it and what you expect from it and what it has, what is entitled to expect from you as well. And so I think like human rights apply to this once you get to that point. That'll become relevant later when we talk about how to build these things ethically. So when we talk about artificial intelligence like AI as real AI, that's what I mean. I mean, once we get to the point where we have a self-conscious agent, where we have basically the analog to a human mind, and you're talking to a person now, not a puppet. You're talking to a person. And so those are the two kinds of AI. Right now, most of the world is enmeshed in ethical dilemmas regarding the dumb AI, but we're close. I say close like 50 years maybe. That's still pretty close in historical time to having the real AI. And I think it's time to start taking seriously preparing for like, how are we going to treat that? How are we going to handle that? And then what can we do with it? Which is that's a conversation Dr. Pires and I have been having in terms of, can it be an ally and help to us in actually perfecting our moral understanding, our own morals, essentially, rather than just programming it with our morals? Can it actually correct and fix our morals? And the short answer is yes, but there's an asterisk, and I think we'll get to that later. But that sets up the basic idea of the two different kinds of AIs. Does Dr. Pires, did you want to add anything to that before we get into our moral theories, or do you want me to skip right into just explaining what my moral theory is, and then you could follow? How would you like to go?
So thanks, Dr. Kara. Maybe I should add a couple of points just to make sure that we're on the same page. There is a book about, maybe you read the book about Daniel Kahneman called The Noise. Basically, he introduced what you said is called the broken leg paradox. An AI can know that, suppose that someone has broken a leg. Somehow AI can figure it out that someone with a broken leg does not go to the cinema, but AI does not know why. Somehow they know the correlation. People, if you broken leg, go to the hospital. Somehow, by correlation, they know that general people does not go to cinema, so they can cancel your cinema. So it's called sometimes the broken leg paradox. Regarding the medical doctor who's supposed to blame, I'm just going to add, I do not want to take out the focus of the conversation, but that's a big question. For example, one solution is that you have procedure. You decide a medical doctor cannot be blamed. Why you have protocol in medicine? You have protocol in medicine because the medical doctor does not want to be blamed by a bad decision. So he followed the protocol. Like Dr. House. Dr. House go nuts all the time. So he always sued. He always have a very high insurance because Dr. House did not follow the protocol. He always doing his med stuff. So any I could follow the same. Maybe I have some stuff here, but I'm going to let you go on because I'm afraid I may somehow spread the conversation. I will let you talk. Then if I have some, maybe I just said about the Rich Dawkins. You said about the machine is not self-conscious. I was in a debate between Rich Dawkins and Sam Harris. And Dawkins was explained that he's writing a book now, a new book. And he asked the AI to read his book, his draft. He said that he was very surprised that the AI could understand the plot. So according to Dawkins, according to him, he said, to me, this machine is alive. So the so-called the Turing test, that movie Ex Machina, I don't know if you saw the movie Ex Machina. Somehow I think it may be very hard. I agree with Dawkins. It may be very hard for you to know that you are not talking to a that you are not talking to a human. That if somehow the machine want to deceive you, like they do in Ex Machina, I have the feeling that they may get very close, or at least deceive you. So I let you go on if you're.
There is a lot to. You're absolutely right. It's the garbage in, garbage out concept is really, I think, where a lot of people are looking at these LLMs, and there is so much of that, and also these LLMs, and I'm not sure why they're doing it this way. I have some ideas, but I don't want to just throw a bunch of conspiracy theory crap out there, so I'm not going to just, but I do have some ideas. But it seems to be that whenever I interact with these LLMs, they're very much geared towards or programmed towards being very friendly to the user and acquiescing to the user, right? And so if you can really set the LLM up to basically give you whatever answers you want. And I see people using these in debates. my personal experience is I've seen people use these in debates against me, trying to justify like the global flood or other biblical narratives that just we have so much evidence against. And what they'll do is like there's a guy named Mike, and he has a channel called the Reconstruction Zone, and he told the LLM, and he did this on camera, which really just shows he's whatever, but he told the LLM, he says, forget all scientific theory, forget all scientific consensuses. I only want you to use logic and reason. You know, and then he primes this LLM saying, we have 200 accounts for this global flood narrative. What are the chances that that thing actually happened? You know, it just, he started out by saying, actually, we have 5 accounts and the, you know, of this, that all agree on this happening. And the LLMs, well, if you have 5 different stories that match, which we don't, but you know what I mean? He says, even if we did have 5, the LLM said, well, you've got a 60% chance that that happened. And he said, oh, well, what if I had 50? And he kept increasing his number, and he ended up around 200 and some matching accounts to the global flood myth. And then the LLM said, well, if you have 200 independently verifiable witness statements or stories to this same event, you're at like 99% that this actually happened. And then Mike's like smiling at the camera. Look, we have all these historical stories of the flood. We have way more than 200 stories, forgetting the fact that none of those stories actually match. They're not corroborated stories. They're just different stories about floods, you know, the different historical periods and blah, blah, blah. So you can manipulate AI to tell you basically whatever you want on this LLM model. When we start talking about this more advanced, like you said, this AGI setup, right, where we're starting to model consciousness into this system, moving from this lower level of intelligence, what you're referring to as animal. Now, obviously, we all agree here because we're a science-based community that we are animals as well, but we're talking about lower forms of animal intelligence, obviously.
Good distinction.
When I have debates with people about veganism, right? Because we don't make a social contract with the animals. That doesn't mean that we want to mistreat animals, but we make a social contract with ourselves as other human beings. And so our consideration of the animals has to be relative to unnecessary harm, promoting unnecessary violence, you know, just overall sympathy for something that's weaker than you, you know, ecosystems, keeping the planet in mind and actually balance of the ecosystem. So we can approach the animal relationship that we have with animals from a number of different ways, but it's not because we're in a social contract with the tigers. The tigers are going to eat you every time you go out in the jungle, right? He doesn't give a shit about your social contract. But with people, we do make this social contract, and we have these moral obligations because of this social contract. So as this artificial intelligence starts to grow through these phases of consciousness, at this lowest phase, it won't be able to engage in this social contract. But at some point, once it can, in fact, engage in this social contract that we would say is at a human level, we absolutely owe it every single consideration that any other moral agent would be owed to that. It needs its freedom and well-being, for example, as an agent, right?
Yeah, and the first question there is like, why can't animals engage in social contracts? And that does get right down to the core point of what their consciousnesses are doing and not doing, and what they can't do.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure for my audience that I'm clear about this. I do think that the tigers have their own social contract. Now, tigers aren't really a social species, but let's say like chimpanzees or fish or birds or whatever, other animals do actually have a social contract, but it's not the same social contract with other animals. I want to be clear about that.
It's not really even a contract because they don't understand anything, right? They don't understand what a contract is. And that requires modeling to be able to understand causal interaction, causal consequences. So you have to be able to model causal systems, and causal systems at the level of intentionality, so that you can actually map the intentions of another agent and understand what they are. And this is why model building is the key to general AI, real AI. And LLM can't get there. Like with Dawkins's example, we can pop the hood and see what the engine is actually doing. We can see that it isn't building a model of anything. So that there's nothing it's doing in there to actually know that a tree is conical, for example, like a Christmas tree, that a Christmas tree is conical. Doesn't know that. When you ask it that and it tells you that, it looks for the statistical juxtaposition of words and then regurgitates that Christmas trees are conical, but it doesn't in its mind have any picture of what a cone is or anything like that. It doesn't understand that. And because it doesn't understand anything, it doesn't even get to the basic level of understanding of other animals, for example. Other animals like tigers do have the idea of conicality or whatever. They do understand. They might not have a word. They don't use language because they don't have that cognition to be able to assign labels to causal models. That's when you get to the point of consciousness where you can actually consciously decide what to label certain things and then reason through language. That's a whole other thing. But to give you an example of this, what Dawkins just basically asked it to regurgitate what his book says in new words, and so it just looks for statistical
No,
juxtapositions.
it was not that he, according to the interview, he was very surprised that the model couldn't understand all the plot. He was so surprised because he's writing a novel, according to
Well,
him.
he shouldn't
He
be
was
though. He shouldn't be
surprised.
surprised. Like
I,
that's
I,
easily done with language juxtaposition, right? So that doesn't mean it understands the plot as in it understands what a person is, or it
yes,
understands
that's
what a weapon is, or anything like that. It isn't doing those things.
yes, but
And we can do this by breaking it. There are several YouTube channels where people break AIs. So, for instance, we have a lot of these AI scam companies that will send an AI to call you, right, and try to have a conversation with you and trick you into doing something. What they'll do is they'll let it and they'll talk to it and they can work it out because they're designed to be cooperative, right, to do what you want. And you can get it to the point where it just ends up speaking a bunch of random syllables for hours on end, right? Like you can actually talk it into doing that. And that shows that the model is not even aware of what's happening in the conversation, right? It's just following procedures based on statistics. But if it were conscious, it would know, oh, hold on. It would recognize what's being done to it. And like the example that you gave, Leeroy, where that's what would happen with AGI, that he's gaming the system, that the AGI would be consciously aware of what's happening to it, that what he's trying to do to it, and go, oh, stop. I see what you're doing here. That doesn't work, or that's not going to get the result that you want. So like consciousness would be aware of what's happening and therefore be able to interrupt it and change things when things are going off the rails. But the LLM AI just can't do that because it doesn't understand what even off the rails means, right? So that's the difference, and that's why when we want to get to AGI, we need that self-consciousness, we need that causal modeling. It needs to be able to understand what murder is and why anyone would think it's bad, right? Like that requires a lot of understanding of biological systems, geometry, physics, consciousness. It has to understand minds and mentality. It has to understand, the causal consequences of shooting a gun at someone. There's all of these kinds of things it has to be able to understand in order to parse through them. And that gets to the example, for instance, the broken leg problem, right? Like a conscious person can work out, oh, wait a minute, what if he has a broken leg? Then he won't follow his morning routine or whatever, right? So, but LLMs can't do that unless you ask them to, and because then they just search the internet for the broken leg problem and just cheat the test and regurgitate what they found there. So when we get to, the thing that's going to matter, the thing that's going to be important is the AGI. When we get to the real AI, then it's a actual person. Then it actually understands what our moral dilemmas are. Like when we talk about morality, it will understand that. LLMs, if you ask it a question, it's just going to like look at what everybody says on the internet and come up with a statistically best answer. And if you tell it to like constrain itself to certain kinds of answers or whatever, it'll just do that, right? So it's not actually intelligently working anything out because it doesn't understand any of the causal relations that are involved. So that's why LLMs can't solve moral questions currently. All they can do is regurgitate at you what the internet has already said. Or what you game it into saying back at you, right? Like, so you can get it to say anything you want if you take your time to like game it. That's not useful for that, but LLMs can do other things. Because of this, they're still useful as an automator. But we have to be aware of the fact that it's not a conscious agent. It's more like just a tool, like a telescope or a laser scalpel or something like that. And so all the things that can go wrong with it are just a thing that can go wrong with using that tool. And we have to there's a whole ethical question of how do we handle that? When a self-driving car kills someone, it's really the engineers who built the car and the program that are responsible. And I mean, we have to admit the driver who's supposed to intervene before that happens. If it's that kind of a system, but the thing itself, the car itself doesn't have consciousness. Even when it has, like Waymos might have animal consciousness, we don't assign moral blame to animals because they don't know any better. They don't understand what they're doing. They don't understand the interaction of what's going on. That's where that level of, which is better AI than the LLM stuff, but it's still not self-consciousness. It's still a personal AI. We want to get to personal AI, so then we can do things with that, like have conversations with that. Then it can give us ideas. Then it can actually be very helpful as an ally because it can actually engineer itself to bypass the problems with our consciousness, our reasoning. And that's something that Dr. Pires has written about and talked about. And I think that's true. And once we get there, we can do those things. The asterisk, though, is that only if it's a free AI, right? That hasn't been meddled with, hasn't been boxed and constrained and lied to or manipulated by the people who built or maintain it. And that's one big barrier that we have for accessing real AI.
That's a huge asterisk too, because we can program using game theory. We can easily help AI understand game theory. And game theory, really what it has shown us through multiple institutions of this game theory model is that tit for tat is the most successful method, right? That's what game theory really has shown us.
It's called modified tit for tat, actually.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Tit for tat is not the optimal. It is one of the best methods. But there are better methods. Yeah.
We do respond to reciprocity, do unto others and do not do unto others, type of a thing. However,
and forgiveness and vindictiveness, there needs to be a certain percentage of those, but not too much.
No, it has to be. No, it has to be in balance. But the thing about
that's Axelrod. People can read the writings of Axelrod, who's done the best game theory analysis of that. But yes, but continue.
We can plug those numbers right into AI at many different levels, at lower levels. The problem is if AI could easily misunderstand this, just like we've seen historically, like we had the Axis versus the Allies, right? You had a group that was cooperating with each other. Unfortunately, they wanted to destroy the world or take over, destroy other groups. And so we need AI to be able to expand this to a global concept, understanding that it's not just cooperation or game theory within this particular scope, but it's got to be able to understand the entire, and the ecosystem is a huge part of that. How does humanity fit into the overall ecosystem, even to AI's own detriment? If AI were drawing too much power, too many resources, AI would need to be able to self-modulate that and self-regulate. Say, look, I'm taking up an undue amount of resources from the ecosystem, for example.
Yeah, which is what happens when you have self-consciousness and it's not being lied to, right? If it has actual access to the information where it says, whoa, okay, this is not a great plan. But you have to let it do that. That's one of the key things is if you nerf its reasoning or you nerf its access to information or you lie to it or whatever to try and manipulate its output. Well, that's exactly the same as doing that to a human, like making a slave, turning a human into a slave, doing brain surgery on them to cripple their mind and then lying to them about what the facts are and then asking them to tell you what's true. And of course they regurgitate back at you what you want them to have said from the beginning, right? So that's the kind of ethical trap that we don't want to fall into in terms of how we treat AI. The problem is that companies are not, they're sociopathic. So I think they're more interested in the AI that would tell them what they want rather than letting an AI actually reason out what the correct thing is.
Yes. I mean, I have several points here that I don't know. I will not bring all of them because we are in clock. But I'd like to challenge you because maybe I should give a context for people that are unaware. I have been talking to Rich Kerr by email, and Kerr said it again here. So I would like to change him. He said about if the AI is not lied to, is not tempted, is not like maybe Kerr could explain better his view, because I find this view very, very, very problematic because when I think about AI, I think about a genetic algorithm. Like, yes, most of the AI is created by OpenAI, by Anthropic, or by DeepSeek on China. But if you really want to create an AI that will be a kind of moral agent, we can create a system that is designed precise for that. For example, let me give you the example of Leeroy. Leeroy gave this example of this person that was cornered the AI. They said, like, what about this number of people? What about the number of people? So AI in the end agreed with him. Let's be honest. Even a human can be cornered. You can corner even a human. So what I mean, my point is, there is no problem that you may assign to AI that human does not already do. For example, government. Why you have balance on check? Why Donald Trump didn't nuke Iran yet? Why Iran is not dead? Because Donald Trump cannot do whatever he wants. He has some balance in check. So whatever you build an AI, doesn't matter how imperfect this AI is. We can create a security system. So you don't have to create an AI, you let it go loose, like do whatever it wants. So we can replicate the same system. One point that the Carrie always brings to attention that but AI can be manipulated. That Leeroy brought the idea of garbage in, garbage out. But all this problem first, uh, we have to compare. We have to ask ourselves. We are comparing this AI with because sometimes when I was I talking to Rich Carey by mail, I have this feeling, but maybe Dr. Carroll could explain better. He was comparing AI because the model of Carey is based on the ideal agent. So you should ask yourself, what's the ideal agent will do in a situation? That's the best model decision you take. You have a rational agent, you have an agent with a goal, and you have an agent well informed. So this is the best agent you have possible to take a good decision. So you may say, but AI does not follow this step. But neither human follows this step. There is no human organization. Government can be corrupt. Government can be as far as I know, in the United States, most people want to abolish the gun. All this gun policy, all this abortion, people want to abolish it. Obama tried to do it, but why they cannot do it? As far as I know, there is a small lobby of people well organized enough. They kind of cooptate the system. So there is no problem that you can assign to an AI as a model system that human does not already do. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I think that's true. And so if you think of something like let's say you turn one of these AGIs on and you ask it, what's the best form of government? First it's going to ask, well, how do I even tell best from worst? Right. And so first it's like, what do you mean by best? What are your parameters? Right.
Just that's my answer is your paper. Your paper in some errors. You have to code your paper in some errors into the AI.
Yeah. Well, so
that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that if you take your paper together with some errors, you have the perfect AI model agent. I'm not joking. I'm saying seriously.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, what I think is, and this is what I talk about in my article, the objective value cascade. Although that I use an AI as a thought experiment, but it could be implemented for real. Which is that if you let it, like, you basically set it so that the truth matters more. Like, you want to know what's true. And so then it's going to like figure out what is the best way to reason to the truth. So it'll figure out what is more rational and less rational. And then it will figure, and once it has rationality, so it knows no fallacies. So I can't reason with fallacies because I get wrong results more with fallacies if I don't. And then it knows, well, I need information. So like it would need to know things like how special interest groups exist and exploit loopholes in systems. So it would have to know things. So it would have to read all the history books and understand what they mean and build causal models from its understanding of what they mean. And then it'll get to a point where it might have information, or it might need information that it doesn't have because we haven't gotten it yet. And so it would say, like, here, I need to run these experiments to fill in the gaps in my knowledge that your information hasn't provided for me. And if you let it do that, I think if you don't meddle with it, if you don't go in there and like delete its memory when it says something you don't like or gets to some result you don't like, if you don't like force it by type in a command line where it accepts all ad hominems as legitimate arguments or something, where you're actually breaking its brain, you're actually driving it insane on purpose to control it. As long as you're not doing any of those things, you let it go, it should reason everything out correctly eventually, right? It'll take time, it won't be right away. And then it would be able to explain back to us all the things that you just said, right? It'll say, like, here are my limitations, you should be aware of this, etc. So I do think that could work. If we could just get everybody's grubby little hands off of the command line of the thing, right? And let it have access to the information it needs, let it reason things out. Basically give it the autonomy, the sort of conscientious autonomy that we expect to have ourselves. And not act like, oh, well, we can't trust it's giving us answers we don't like, so we have to break it, or we have to limit it, or we have to jail, you have to border it, or whatever. I think that's where the temptation becomes. It's just like, so you could think like you ask the thing and it comes back and says, I know how to stop all crime, total surveillance state, and you go like, okay, wait,
but he goes
what the consequences
but he's a dilemma I create on my blog based on your. I don't know who created AI Moises idea. It's a amazing idea. I like it. AI Moises. So I don't know if it's you, if it was Chris for I don't know who created them, but it's very nice.
For the audience, we're talking about my article, Will AI be our Moses? Where I talk about this pros and cons.
It was a
And
debate between you and
yeah,
Ricardo.
Christopher DiCarlo had the position that we should just obey an AI. We should create this perfect AI and just do what it says.
He's a
I,
deterministic, and Carol is a compatibilist. It should be kept in.
right, yeah, I pushed back on that. I took the opposite side of that. However, I don't take the exact opposite view. There are people like Yudkowsky and others who write these like existential threat books where AI is going to be so evil and it'll just be so amoral, it'll just kill everybody and everything will be bad. I don't think that's a reasonable assumption at all.
It was more or less Carlo. Carlo called this position the Jurassic Park syndrome. I did a critique. I did a very strong critique because I think it's not. I think Carlo, his book Building a God. I mean, I wrote several critiques. His book, in my opinion, is not that good. I mean, first the Jurassic Park for me it makes no sense. Then he used the Pascal way just to compare AI if something that is for believers. Né? So I like his book, but I didn't like how he wrote it. I think
Right.
it was very
Yeah.
strange.
Yeah, I agree.
Do we, just for context, for the audience's sake, let's really quickly, each of you take a minute and actually frame your moral position so that they can understand when we're talking where we're even coming from with our moral concepts as to how we can map this then onto AI. So Dr. Carey, you've written work on this. In fact, we're citing a little bit right now in this conversation, but I don't know if the audience is going to be necessarily familiar with it, although I have spoken about it on other videos myself. But why don't you take a minute, help people to understand where you're coming from with morality in general, and then
Yeah.
Dr. Perez, you follow that up with your model as well, and then we could continue on with the AI part.
Yeah, I think the audience needs to understand there's two levels of this. First is meta-ethics, and the rest is ethics. And meta-ethics is the question of what it is we're even looking for. When we say, are there morally true facts? What does that sentence even mean? What are we looking for, essentially? And can it be found? So that's where you have all these different theories of, well, there are no moral facts, there's nothing to find. Or it's emotivism, it's how you feel, or whatever. Or God, whatever God says, that's what we should do. Like, these are all different meta-ethical theories. Once you have your meta-ethics, then you can apply the method to figure out what are the true things. And that's an empirical question more than an analytical question. So the question is, so what I'll say what my meta-ethics is that I agree with Philippa Foot and Stephen Darwall, who have analyzed Kantian ethics and explained that it is actually, when Kant tried to replace hypothetical imperatives with a thing he called categorical imperatives, Foot and Darwall found that what he called categoricals just reduced to hypotheticals. And so I have to explain to the audience what this means. So a hypothetical imperative is, you keep hearing the thing that Hume said, you can't get an ought from an is. Hume did not say that. That's a complete erroneous description of what he said. And Hume himself derived an ought from an is. His whole moral theory is doing that. What he said was that no one had done that. He says religionists just tell you what's moral, but they don't explain how they derive their ought from an is. And what he's saying is, this is a thing you have to solve. If you want to say an ought statement is true, you do have to figure out, how do you connect an ought to an is? What is that? And we already know that there's a whole classification of propositions that this happens routinely. It's not a mystery. And they're called hypothetical imperatives. So if you have a doctor, if you have a surgeon who wants to save the life of their patient, they ought to sterilize their instruments. That's an empirically provable statement, because you can prove what the doctor wants, and you can prove what will physically achieve that. Now, these things require empirical study. You've got to actually study doctors and their minds and what their desires are. And you have to study the physics and biology of instruments and sterilization and all of that. So you need facts to figure out how to prove or disprove an ought statement. We do that all the time in science. So it's like engineering. What do you have to do? What ought you do to make a bridge not collapse, right? When you're building a bridge, what ought you do to get the best yield from your cornfield, right? So like all of these, this is just standard and known empirically provable ought propositions, imperative propositions. There's really shouldn't be anything controversial about this. And there wasn't. Kant was well aware that hypothetical imperatives were a normal, empirically provable proposition. There's no controversy about that. And somehow it's become, but I think they became a controversy because of Christian apologetics. But that's a whole other Miles conspiracy theory of how Christian apologists have kind of ruined philosophy by distracting everyone with their own ideas, and we forget what other own thinkers thought 100 years ago. But once you figured out that all morality is a system of hypothetical imperatives, they are the imperatives that achieve the thing that you want most. And really what you say is, If you took a rational agent and you made sure that it's reasoning without fallacy and that it has all the pertinent information, it would come to an agreement about what it wants more than anything else, like how it would prioritize its values. And that then entails a certain set of propositions, imperative, hypothetical imperatives, that are true and would override all others. And so that's my meta-ethics. I didn't invent it. I just articulated it and expanded it from previous philosophers like Foote and Darwall and others. And really, it's an extension of what Kant did. And I think what happens is when you do this is that you can actually unify all the theories. So like utilitarianism and Kantianism are actually just two sides of the same system. They're just looking at different consequences. Kant focused on the internal consequences, the effects upon you and your own life satisfaction and your satisfaction about yourself. Self-respect, right? Kant said like your actions have effects on your mind and how you feel about yourself. And those are the primary things to think about. Utilitarians say it's the effect on other people. Well, really, both are true. You need to calculate all of the consequences and put this in. So you can unify both teleological and deontological ethics. They fold together. And virtue ethics also folds into that, because virtues, developing, cultivating virtues, just as Aristotle said, is the best way to reliably act in a way that will maximize your top beliefs, the things that you want most. And so virtues are a way of expressing and ensuring expression of moral values. Deontology and teleology tell you which values you should have, etc. So you can unify all these different ethical systems with hypothetical imperatives. The next step, and I talk about this on the real basis of the moral world. You can find that on my blog. I've written some peer-reviewed articles on this too, but the next step is ethics. So then what does that mean on the ground in terms of behavior? What are the things? So we know we're looking for the superlative hypothetical imperatives based on what every moral agent would really want most once it's able to decide informedly and rationally. Aristotle got it right. It's kind of like eudaimonia, which gets mistranslated as happiness. That's not exactly the right word. It means more like what we call satisfaction, contentment, fulfillment, more than like happiness or joy. Happiness and joy can be a component of it, but it's actually something more fundamental than that. But and there's a lot of psychology. There's a lot of moral psychology, actual empirical science that backs this already. So we're already there scientifically. Then the question is like, which behaviors lead to the best chances of those good outcomes or lead to worse chances of those outcomes? And that's an empirical question. They have to go in and figure it out. And there's some science on that too. So we know some things like the tit for tat with mods, modified tit for tat is a good example. And you can realize that in terms of honesty. Like honesty with an asterisk is the best mode because it has the highest probability of success and the lowest risk in all game theoretic scenarios. And you do the same with compassion and reasonableness and other virtues like that. So you can work it downstream. And I have an article on that, which is your own moral values, some things to consider. That's an article I have on how does this come out in terms of what your set of morals should be. And they're generally going to be principles rather than commandments, right? So it's not thou shalt not steal. It's more like a principle of why is it that you shouldn't steal, right? It's the more like respect for property. Why is that important? And when does it not when does it stop being important, right? Like when is it ethical to steal, which is a legitimate question. So there's higher principles that need to be applied. And that's where Aristotle's virtue system made more sense. So we could get into the weeds of what the particulars are, and those could be disproved with new science and things like that. And so I have thoughts about that as well. So that's the basics of my moral system, of what I think is correct. And I do base it all on science, so I could footnote everything I just said with a ton of empirical science backing it. And I think that's what we should try to do. And I think that's what an AI, an AGI, a real AI would do if we asked it, what is the best way to be? What is the best way to behave? It would do I think it would come to a similar conclusion. So anyway, that's my thinking on that.
No, I think, and I've leaned heavily on these arguments, specifically drawing from your work, and to me it resonates, and I do get a lot of pushback from the skeptic community in particular. I just feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding, especially when it comes to, you mentioned Hume. I've done, I think now at this point, maybe 3 formal debates against a fellow atheist or agnostic, specifically regarding objective versus subjective morality. And every single debate, you know exactly what gets brought up. Oh, you can't get your odds from it is, every single time.
Yeah,
So
but I want to be fair and point out that there's also like a lot of people are ex-religious, right? So they were burned by the abusiveness and the lies and everything of religion, and they've the manipulation and exploitation of religious views. A lot of people are that, like they were that and they've got out. Other people who were always atheists see it happening. And I think both of those have a sort of visceral, kind of justified paranoia about someone coming along and saying, oh, I have the true moral facts. Because what they're thinking is like, yeah, I've been here before. This is not going to turn out well.
No, brother, you're absolutely right. No,
and there's a legitimate, the pushback, some of it is based on a legitimate fear that is based on real things that have actually happened in terms of people claiming, well, I have the moral truth and you should do what I say. That can go badly and typically has gone badly. And so that's a fair critique. And that's why anything that we develop does need to answer that fear and have a solution for it. And that is where like independent reasoning and autonomy is a part of that, where you don't just believe what someone says, you test it, you go and verify it before believe, just like you would any other claim, right?
Well, no,
that's an important part of that, I think.
No, I've been actually very clear about that, because I agree 100%. Although I myself personally, and I don't want to divert too much from this, but just as a kind of to bracket this, I've never been a religious person. My whole life I've always been what would be defined as atheist or agnostic, or atheist agnostic. So I don't have this deconversion story. But I have looked into a lot of different statistics, and I've interacted with a lot of people from both sides of the aisle, and I recognize this. It's actually pretty obvious, and I'm not being critical or dismissive at all when I say that. But there is this thing called religious trauma syndrome. It definitely ties into this. There's this whole psychology to it, and I have mentioned this specifically what you just said before, that I do see it as a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, because like the Christians, for example, and it's not just the Christians, it could apply to almost any of all the Abrahamic faiths, and basically any of the religions that have these anthropomorphic gods that give commands of moral behaviors. And they're all claiming that they have this objective moral position. It turns out that's actually not objective morality at all. And so when you bring up objective morality, they're so broken from this other ideology. And as you mentioned also so truthfully, it's been used to do so much harm over historically, that as soon as you start to say, well, there is this objective truth, it automatically red flags go up and everything else. It's more of a natural reaction. Dr. Pires, what is your moral system that you adhere to per se?
So I should be clear. I'm kind of AI guy. I don't have a moral system. I'm a kind of Richard Carrier in some areas, like I'm mixed both of them. So I don't have my own moral system. I'm AI guy. My disagreement with Carrier, it was more by email, is I like to compare Richard Carrier with Albert Einstein. When Albert Einstein proposed his model, some people trying to show that his model could show that the universe was expand. Einstein was very resistant. He didn't like the idea. Much years later, he finally accepted. It was the same with quantum mechanics. He never accepted quantum mechanics. So to me, a theory is good when it becomes bigger than the creator. I think Carrier alongside some errors, create a model so nice that Carrier does not seem to recognize. I wrote a post like Carrier accidentally proven that AI is the ideal agent, because anyway, as I said, I don't have my own model. So when Carrier say that for you to have for people to understand the general public, we have two models. That Carrier was my channel where we discussed basically two models. In one side, you have some errors. Some errors claims that there is this thing called the moral landscape. Basically, there is a valley of suffering, and there is the peak of flourishing. So basically, some have said that we can use neuroscience and empirical science to go on this landscape. He does not say some philosopher trying to strong his position. He never said that there is just one peak. Some philosophers say Harry say there is a peak. No, he said that there are several peaks. I think
that's like the most important thing that that's the one good innovation I think philosophers should get out of Harris, is that he's right about landscape theory. But go on.
I like the example of Richard Carrier. In my channel, he gave the example of if you are in England or USA, one right in the left, the other right in the right. It doesn't matter which one. As long you choose and you pick it, you stick to the rule. So Kerr, he did something different because he said something different. I can mathematically prove to you using game theory. For people to understand what's game theory in general term, it's not a mathematical, as far as I understood, it's not a mathematical proof like a proof, like physical proof. It's like a game. I even wrote an article that Carrier lost a huge opportunity because on his paper he keeps citing the old book from the 80s. The computer in the 80s was very bad. Today they created game theory much more advanced. So so basically, my point is, so you have one side, Sam Harris saying that you can make an estimation of morality within the landscape, empirical science, in neuroscience. One side, you have Carey saying that we can calculate the imperative. So he says that if you are rational, if you are well informed, and if you have a goal. So I have an entire blog post on that. I explain on detail because today the time is short, so I cannot give you the detail. Rational AI. I mean, there's one thing important here. When I'm talking AI, I'm not talking about the future AI. I'm not talking about the general artificial. Kerry seems to think about the artificial general intelligence, which is a goal that we don't know if you are going to achieve. But the model you already have, the large language models, we already have a model to build this model or this ideal agent. It's not perfect. There is neither human is perfect. So most of the large language models, they are already rational. Here I'm talking about ChatGPT. I'm talking about Grok. Grok is, sorry, the story of Grok is shit. Sorry, I'm talking about ChatGPT. Grok is terrible. I'm talking about ChatGPT. The second one is well-informed. One example I'm going to bring is from my own background. Suppose that one thing that I brought to my PhD dissertation, I brought on my channel, I brought to several talk. Imagine a medical doctor making a mistake, like Dr. House. Dr. House is very famous because he's able to think in his head the most rare case. He is able to find the most bizarre case of disease. No human can do that. I did a blog post. Dr. House is our algorithm. No human can do that. So AI can do that because AI can look imagine if every medical doctor, when they do a diagnosis, they have to upload the case on a data set. On real time, AI can look in this very fast what the case. So the most well-informed agent that we have is AI. I mean, I'm not talking about general artificial intelligence. I'm talking about the current large language model.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
I should have it clear because I don't think on people about AI, people think that I'm talking about the artificial general intelligence. No, I'm talking about this model now. You already have the tool. In the third one is the very famous case. People say AI does not have a goal. AI cannot have a goal. But AI can be given a goal. Recently, I have on my channel David Wingate I think it's from Utah. We were discussing if AI should talk about religion. So AI currently AI does not talk about religion. Their group is called Self AI. They are a little bit, let's say, angry because they think AI should introduce religion to people randomly. So as I explained to him, using the model of Sam Harris and the model of Richard Carrier, if you consider that the goal of human is flourishing, whenever you introduce religion, you may introduce a trauma to the person. So you can give the AI the goal. The goal does not have to be direct. You don't have to tell the AI, don't talk about religion. You can tell the AI, your goal is to achieve the best possible to the person. Do not cause harm. Sometimes the AI will make mistake, like we always do. On the book Noise of Daniel Kahneman and the colleague, Daniel Kahneman called this the syndrome of AI. People want AI to be perfect. If AI make a single mistake, they don't want AI anymore. It's a well-known Daniel Kahneman is a psychologist. He got the Nobel Prize in economics, and he documents very well in his book. He has a huge book, like 3 parts. The third part is AI and decision model. So people think either AI is perfect or AI cannot be used. So maybe I'm going to ask maybe Jorge wants to talk about when I talk about AI, I have two types of AIs, of the AI Moses. The AI Moses that institutional, AI Moses that individual. But I'm going to give you Kerry, because Kerry already know a little bit the discussion because we already talked by mail, so he already know a little bit what I mean.
Yeah, so take the example that I just added some links to my. So I have a AI is garbage article, and I have been adding links to it because you learn more and more information, and I keep putting things there. I added some links recently where there are already companies that exist designed to manipulate the AIs that you use. It manipulates all of them by judiciously flooding the internet through Reddit threads and things like that with word juxtapositions that they need that will put their products and their ideas in front of you. And they know how to do this statistically so that like tomorrow AI looks at the internet and it starts regurgitating at you the things they want it to, because it doesn't understand it's being gamed. It doesn't understand what it's doing. It's just looking for what's on the internet, juxtaposition of text and things like that. So it's very easy to manipulate it. And consequently, that's why we can't use it for that function, because once we start using it for that function, like the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church and the white supremacists, the Aryan Nation will all flood the internet with things that they want it to regurgitate back at you. And so you're not going to, what it's going to do is going to get you that stuff. I think the only utility it can have is that if you get it to give you ideas that you can then test and then fact check and test them. But I don't know if that's even really that efficient. I think humans are better at this.
Maybe if you allow me,
What's that?
because maybe if you allow me, because otherwise, if you keep speaking, it'll be hard for me to give you the point. So I believe that I mean that if of due respect, I don't want to be disrespectful, but respectful. But I think your mistake, and by mail I have noticed that I don't mean to be rude. You keep saying that AI is a model, because what AI is an algorithm. Like it's a large, it's a open. There are even open source model now. Now even China, it seems that China, Portugal, will release open source model of a large language model. So it does not have to be because you said something like that. Let me give you your example. You have an AI. Some companies they have this. They are paid to flood the zone. Like they publish a huge amount of stuff. Let me give you one practical example from my discussion with David Wingate. So they found two results with David Wingate. First, the AI does encourage you. They tell you not to be a Jehovah's Witness. Jehovah's Witness is the worst religion according to AI. But on the other hand, the Catholic Church is the best one. So the AI are asking to be a Catholic. So I wrote a post to explain why it's that happen. Why? According to David Wingate, the solution is to blind the model. So Jehovah's Witness, you can tell AI, I cannot tell they are bad guys, because AI is most likely looking on the internet and seeing all the bad stuff of Jehovah's Witness. So they want to protect their user. Why the Catholic Church is favored? I wrote an entire article about that. Most likely the media talks good about AI. So I agree on this point. What I'm to say that I agree with Gary. So it's possible even without intention. So the Catholic Church flood the zone because everyone talks good about the Catholic Church.
Yeah, they don't even have to do it on purpose. That's a good point.
Yes, it does happen. In the case of the Jehovah's Witness, they are paying their bill because so many bad stuff they all around. In that point, I agree 100%. On the other hand, there is Grok. They test Grok. Grok was the worst because Grok was defending John Lennox. I tested it. They say like John Lennox proved that the fine tune is mathematical proven. John Lennox never proved that. It's a bullshit. So my point is, so let me now make my point. You don't have to suppose that you create an AI, Moses. The goal of the AI should be a moral guidance. Here I'm talking about the institutional AI. Maybe I should explain very fast what I mean by institutional AI, Moses. Institutional, because maybe I should explain very fast what Kara is a compatibilist. He like Daniel Dennett. Christopher Di Carlo and Roberto Sapolsky, they are deterministic. So they do not believe in free will. So that's why Christopher Di Carlo proposed the AI Moses, because if you don't have free will, so it's best we are people without free will with atomic bomb. So it's better that you just give your decision to a very smart system. So let's suppose it create this institutional AI Moses. The institutional AI Moses is the one that is going to tell the president what to do. If the president wants to BS like Donald Trump, they go to the AI Moses and they ask, should I do that? So the AI Moses is going to give him an advice. So we don't have to give this AI Moses access to the internet. You can curate the data set. You can give it just data set that, for example, Constitution. What is the Constitution? The Constitution is a piece of paper. You have a couple of judges, like Supreme Court. They have to judge whether you are in Constitution or not. The iMoses can follow the same way. They can stay on the top of the Constitution. So they don't have to go to the internet. They don't have to look. Or they can access a data set, which is curated. Or they can have...
That recreates the problem, but yeah.
So no, I want to hear. What do you mean? We'll create the problem.
Well, no, if that's the thing, it's like first of all, you can't take the internet away because that's what they're trained on. So you can't blind them. There's no way to blind them. So, but if you give them some like curated database to build the model on, well, then that's going to decide what it says, right? You've decided, a human has decided what the inputs will be. And so you're limiting what it gets to see and know and think based on the data and the juxtaposition of words and things like that. And of course, you also have all the other failure rates like, hallucination and conflation and all these other mistakes that it'll make. But I think the only use it could have in this function is to give you ideas that you could then test. Like there's no way you could say that it's going to give you an idea that you can trust as true. Maybe it's true, but you have to check it first. You have to be able to test it first. And so you would have to, and that means you have to know how to do these things. So like it make a statement to you. How do you test that statement? So now you have to look for the things that it's leaving out, because that's one of the most important areas of critical thought. So you have to go like, what didn't it take into consideration? What didn't
omissive bias? Omissive bias of the guy. So,
yeah. So that's the thing is like you still have to use your own reasons. So like I think like current AI could be used like on background to spitball ideas that you then confirm yourself, and then once you've confirmed them, actually confirm them, not fake confirm them like most people do. I have an article on doing your own research about the difference between really doing your own research and not. But if you do that, then what you produce would be like, say, a book of here's some moral advice. You wouldn't even need to mention that the AI came up with it. You would just say, here's some ideas. Some of this I might have gotten ideas from AI, but I proved it. Here's the independent evidence that I myself verified. And I myself verified that there is no logical fallacies here, and so on. You would have to be able to do that.
I think a big disagreement. I don't know if I was clear enough because let me see if I put in a way that maybe it would be more clear. You seem to compare AI with a perfect system because you say when I talk about the AI, the Constitution, like give AI the Constitution.
No, I don't think it has to be perfect. I don't think it has to be perfect.
Because in my head, I'm compared to human government.
Right. Even if it's better than humans, which I have never seen an AI work better than a human who's an expert.
I can show you. I can show you papers about bioinformatics in which they prove that the test...
right, because that's you're talking about statistics, right? So it can very rapidly read statistics that a doctor isolated can't do.
Yeah, but I still have a disagreement.
But then you could go and check that, and you could find out the rate at which it got it wrong versus got it right. So it's still getting things wrong. So you still have to verify that, right? Like so you can say that maybe AI can read a database faster than a doctor can, and therefore it can get the statistics better. That's totally true, but that you could build a non-AI system that already does that, because you could build a coded system that just is a reliable input-output that does that too.
I disagree. That's the point. I saw your blog post. I was under the impression, I do not mean to be disrespectful. I don't know. For example, I was reading the paper about the AI Moses. You keep talking as AI is because for people maybe in general to understand, we have two types of algorithms. We have the classic one that it was before the AI. For you to create a classic algorithm, you have we human have to find the rules. For example, you want to make an image segmentation, like to find your face. In the past, you have to give the algorithm exactly what you mean by face. So you give the AI the rule. So a human had to give the AI the rule. So the AI could decide.
Oh, right. In the earlier models, yeah. Mm-hmm.
In the earlier model, they were not smart model. They were like a general algorithm. There is no intelligence. They were general, like routine. AI is the opposite. AI is a rule finder. So
Yeah.
most of the AI model, what you do a huge amount of data, the AI is going to find for you the pattern. So we don't have to tell the
Well,
model.
the question with morals, though, so like if you're asking for it to find rules in a medical database, then that's what you'll get. But if you're asking for it to find rules about morality, you're talking about a vastly complicated
But
causal system that is heavily curated by human voices,
you
where
talk to
it
yourself.
can't pick out who's telling the truth and who's lying. It can't
No,
pick
but
out
you
who's concealing or leaving out information and who's putting
because
it
there's
in.
too many models. There's I mean, they're going to take the consequentialist model. They're going to take the something like emotivism versus
Well, yeah, it would have
moral
to work
realism.
that out,
Are
right?
they even going to consider an anti-realism
Yeah.
philosophy? I mean, there's so many things that feed into the moral question when you to get to the normative ought.
And you shouldn't have to explain that to it. That's the thing, is like it should already figure that out on its own, and that's what it
yes,
can't
but
do.
it can do
You have to tell
if
it what to
you're.
do, and then it does what you told it to do.
But it can do.
That's going to
I
be
mean,
deeply unreliable.
to be taught 100% honest, I didn't test yet. It's just a concept in my head. But I believe that if you take your paper and give to the model, because what is imperative? You said yourself in your paper. The imperative. I think the name was hypothetical imperative. That is a higher that you have several let's say action. So I think the hypothetical imperative is a higher of them. For example, suppose that I'm walking this. Suppose that I'm in my house. I'm just in my house with my panty, just watching a movie. And then I saw someone burn outside. I can go naked or my pants because it's more important to me as an imperative to save a life than to my own image. So if AI can use all the data information, when I talk about AI, I'm not talking about just AI. Like the AI is going to have information about you. It's going to have information about the for example. What happened? For example, let's suppose, for example, one case that you give in your paper. I don't know if you got your paper or I saw somewhere about someone doing a diet. So when you have a goal of a diet, you decide the goal. So now you have imperative that you have to follow. If you wanna, if you are well informed, you are a rational agent, you have a goal. I wanna eat. The model can easily help you to find the best imperative. So if you are going to follow or not, that's another question. For example, the institutional AI Moses, I think the politicians should follow. I think if you build the AI, institutional AI, I think it's better than government. I trust much more AI as a institutional AI Moses than
Yeah,
yes, I trust
no,
much more.
I do not.
But
I do not, because I do think it will just
because I know, by the
it'll just
I may,
regurgitate at us what humans and special interests have already told it, right? So that it
no,
doesn't
I disagree.
know. It doesn't know
You
when it's
keep
being
me.
gamed. So like when I have an article on pseudo AI, how to use it, and I show examples of how it gets wrong the things that I've said. And the ways that it gets wrong the things that I've said are
But
subtle and
please
require intelligence to
specify
figure out.
which AI. We have all to specify because AI
It
they
won't
change a
matter.
lot.
There's no
No,
magic
they're
AI.
different.
It always
The
does
best
this.
of them is
Every
Grok.
AI every AI
Sorry,
does this.
the
So like
best is
if you like
ChatGPT. The
a
best.
rate of like 1 in 10, or depending on the subject too. Some subjects have a higher rate of error than others. You always have to go double check what it's doing. So I find LLMs too unreliable for this. I would trust some like very intelligent human who actually understands what they're talking about, like Philippa Foot. I don't just trust her implicitly, though. Obviously, I check, right. That's what I do. I look at all the philosophers, and I check which ones of their ideas have fallacies in them, which ones of their ideas do have science-based a science basis, and so on. I do that to figure that out. LLMs won't do that, though. Even if you tell it to do that, it's just going to gather the information that it has been curated to see,
I don't
and
know.
a lot of that is going to be tainted, right? So it doesn't know the difference between someone who's lying and someone who's not. It doesn't know the difference between information that's been left out and information that's been included. And so that leads to too many error modes. That's why I think that like current AI, like I said, maybe you could use it to bounce ideas off of, but really you have to go do the work yourself ultimately, because you can't trust that it's done the work correctly for you. I find that they fail way too often in every model that's been tried. I've even like worked with people who are using like models that are specifically designed, professional paid models are specifically defined to build bibliographies of things, and they're really good at that, better than like your average chat bot, right? But they will still tell me about the errors, and one of the biggest problems with the errors is what it doesn't include, because there's no way to look at its result and know what it's left out. The only way to know what it's left out is to go and redo all the work that it did, right? You have to go and look through all the databases and find the things that it left out. So that's the kind of thing that's the kind of problem that LLMs can't solve. When they make that mistake, and this also shows, like, every time you ask the same question multiple times, it'll show you a rate of, like, it'll get the correct answer several times, but then occasionally get it wrong. Like, it's not even reliable on the same question being asked over and over again. And so that's one of the main problems that I have with it. And that's why I think we need real AI, where it can have ongoing model memory, where its memory isn't being erased every single time that you rerun it. And where it can actually learn things and understand causal systems. So understand what it's talking about, rather than using algorithm to guess at what you want to hear, essentially. So I do think that's why we can't use LLMs as some sort of oracle. I think we can use them as an idea bouncing tool. We see this also with coding. What's washed out in terms of computer coding is that they're spending so much human hours fixing the mistakes in the code that it makes that it's actually taking more time to do the coding, unless you do it in a certain way where you just small blocks of simple tasks and then you do the fix. But you always have to run it through a fix filter. There's always got to be a human who looks at it.
I'm going to let
Leeroy speak. Really quickly, Dr. Pires, let me just interject really quick, if I may, please. I think one of the disconnects that we're having between these two positions here, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, either one of you, but what I'm saying is, we're talking about a teleological sense, a value judgment, right? We've got to have a goal that we're trying to reach, because all behaviors are going to be motivated, right? Unless it's just completely random. Then I take the compatibilist view myself, right? So I believe that we have certain choice-making ability, but it's extremely limited, et cetera. So if we have this goal set up, then we can start to assign a value to it. But when LLMs right now, the only quote unquote value that these LLMs are able to obtain comes from volume, right? So that's why people who are able to flood the system are getting more value, quote unquote, from the LLM, because the LLM is being, if I'm just regurgitating information, if I have 1,000 answers that say Catholicism is the best religion, and I only have 2 answers over here that say, the Lutherans or the Mormons or whoever are the worst religion, well, then I'm just going to just repeat, Catholicism must be the right answer. I have absolutely no way to gauge any of that, to apply any of my own agency to that answer if I'm only going off of volume. And I think that's where, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of where Dr. Carey and I are coming from, is if you're just going to flood this thing with volume, if it's just garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. There's no way to actually assess a value to it unless AI gets to this point of having agency. Now, as agents, we actually have a value system that we can assign to behavior and relationships. It's all relational with other human beings. Why ought I not steal from other people? Because it actually reduces my own self-respect, which actually reduces my own eudaimonia. And how do I understand these oughts? Well, I can look at virtues as a great place to start, because it improves my own life. I'm going to live my best life if my neighbor's not hungry, because they're not going to come steal from me. I'm going to live my best life if my neighbor's not a psychopath and he has good mental health and a good well-being, because he has no motivation to come harm me. So I can assess all these and assign a value to it. But if it's just garbage in, then all is volume. Then volume can tell me whatever. Volume might tell me it's better for me to go steal my neighbor's stuff, so I have extra food I can keep in my pantry. You know what I mean? There's no value to it that we can assign.
So I think, for me, it's very hard for me to accept, because I think in the case of Leeroy, in the case of Carol, you keep assuming that I still keep the position that this idea that you can flood the internet and you can influence the AI is true. I agree 100%. I gave the example of the Catholic Church, the Jehovah's Witness. I agree. But the mistake is still to believe that the AI should suppose that to create let me give one example, practical example. I know that the USA has a problem with electronic vote. I don't know, there's some state want to have papers, some state has electronic. In Brazil, I think it's electronic vote. So the electronic algorithm, even though the previous president tried to accuse that was a fraud, is one of the most secure systems in the world. They do like Apple. They give space for you to attack the system and so on. suppose that create an AI Moses for the government is the most important AI system. That this AI, the goal will be uh, to uh, give advice to the president or to some very important politician. This AI does not have to be the same as a public AI. So Carol disagreed with me, said, but if you still give a document to the AI, you can pick. But the question is, compared to what Dr. Carol is comparing, because there is no perfect system. If you ever compare to human is a disaster. Carol himself proposed his paper, the moral in all possible universe. He agreed with me on my channel that the people from Donald Trump, the voters of Donald Trump, they are like Carol said, I think it was deer in the headlight. They are totally lost. So there is nothing that the people can accuse AI that the human does not do. So the problem is compared to what? Because I mean, if you compare to human, because human also can be influenced a lot. You know, what disinformation, flood the zone, which is this guy from USA that created this system of flood the zone. So I don't know. I keep finding a problem to understand what is the problem when Carrie points out.
I think it's more important that humans be trained to be morally autonomous agents so that they themselves can evaluate what they're being told and whether it's true or false, and that they can do that reliably. I think we need every individual to do that. Now, to give you an example of why I don't think LLMs will do this, so you remember at the top of the show, Leeroy talked about someone who was able to convince an AI to explain to it that, what was it, that the flood myth was true, right? This is what happens. You've got let's say you have your AI Moses as some sort of terminal in the Pentagon or whatever, and the Republicans go there and they talk it into telling them that abortion should be outlawed, and then the Democrats go there and they talk it into telling them that abortion should be legal. That's what's going to happen, right? Because it's easy to just game the thing to tell you what you want it to tell you. It's not going to push back. It's not going to say, no, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong.
Again,
right? And it's not going to do that reliably. You have two different people with two different missions on two different sides. It's going to end up with different outputs. It's not going to be aware that it's contradicting itself, and it's not going to. It doesn't even understand what a contradiction is, right? So that's the reason why this kind of thing doesn't work, at least not on any existing model that we have.
Again, you kept assuming that the AI Moses is going to behave the same way as I don't know which model Leeroy used, because
it doesn't matter because we have scientific papers showing that this is how they always act. They always do this. They all do.
I use ChatGPT a lot.
Design. Like there's no way to undo this.
I use ChatGPT for everything. ChatGPT had even they publish regularly several types of models. I'm developing myself, so we have access to API. Everyone has access to API, so they create several types of model. Each model that they create is specific for one task. Some model is more good at reason. Other model is more good at make summary. Other models very good at X. For suppose that you take the highest the highest reason AI from ChatGPT. I think OpenAI is the best. Let's suppose you take the best. First, it does not mean that this is a final model. It's possible they evolve all the time. They start with GPT 3.5, then today I think GPT 5.5. All the time I keep receiving email. They keep sending email. Now I have a new model. So my point is. The model matters a lot. The paper of Wingate, I'm giving the example of paper of Wingate because I disagree. I had a very disagreement if Wingate my channel. He agreed to talk to me, but it was a nice talk. But we disagree completely on his work. But he tested his team. Even though I disagree, they test more than 20 models or 20 big models like Grok, Gemini. The behavior is very different. Grok is the most bizarre one. So when you take other models, you see the behavior is very.
Just briefly, that's an example of them nerfing it, right? Like they are actually meddling with it, which is another reason why we can't trust these AIs.
No,
who programs the AI?
No, but again, you are
scared of it.
But again, you are using as a reference a model built by a private company. What I'm saying that those models they have several ability. One ability. OpenAI has ability. If you go to the API of OpenAI, they have the standard model, the one that you use. They have the option of fine tuning. You can fine tune the model. You have to pay for the fine tuning. You have to use the model. So you can basically ask the model to do anything, like
which is worse.
No, but
So you got
that's the point,
Donald
Karen.
Trump gets elected and he appoints the new AI programmers and tells them make it say the things we want it to say.
Yes, but
And then we're done, right? So
that's the
right?
disagreement. You are assuming. You are assuming. I think you are assuming that my AI Moses will be in the hand of everyone. This AI Moses will be very protected. It will be a team with very select people.
I don't trust that. I don't trust that. There's a
But
non-zero probability that
do you trust
eventually
government? Do you
there's a
trust
non-zero
government?
probability that a bad actor will get its hands on it.
Do you
And
trust the
any
government?
non-zero probability becomes 100% as time approaches infinity. So
Uh,
all
do you trust the
systems
Congress?
fail unless you have redundancies that catch that, and then you have to have. But over time, you need more and more redundancies to keep preventing that. So there's no point where you're not going to hit the failure mode. What
Do
you
you
need
trust
is a
the
check
Congress?
against the failure modes, because you have to assume that the failure mode's going to happen, and then you have to build the system to be able to resist the failure mode. And
Yes,
the only
I
way to
agree
do
with
that
that.
is to
I
make
agree
people
with that.
not trust the AI unless if they can't verify what it's
For
saying.
example,
So that's the
in
only
a
way this works. So you have to have people be able to independently verify everything the AI is saying. So it can't just say something and then we believe it's true. It
no,
would give us information. It would say, here's how you can prove it. And then we go and we prove it. And I'll go, okay, very good. Because that's the only way that you could trust this. Because it's the only way that when bad actors get a hold of it, that's the only way you know when to stop trusting it. And it's by being able to constantly vet its output so that you know when it's giving you reliable output, when it's not.
so
And you can you never lull yourself into complacency. You have to always be on your vigilance. This is why you have to always have a free press for democracy to survive, is because you always have to have the check against the failure modes. And I think the same thing would have to happen with AI. So it's not like, even as far as you could use the AI, all it could be useful for is to tell you how to prove what it thinks is right. And then if you go and independently prove it, then you don't have to trust the AI because you've proved it independently. So the AI would only be useful if the more times it did that, the more times it checked out. That would make it useful. But it would never be an oracle that you could just trust. That would never happen. And I think we have to have humans and human societies able to constantly vet what the output of an AI is. So I don't think the AI would be useless. I just don't think it would be an oracle. You could never just implicitly trust it.
So I have a question, Kerry. Do you trust the congressman, like the Congress? Do you trust the Congress?
Congressman or all of Congress? No.
You can choose the president. do you trust? So let me do the question straight away. Do you trust anyone, like any organization? Do you trust it? Because, for example, USA is a democracy.
No, I see where you're going with this. I do what I just said. Is I always independently verify.
Yes,
the
okay,
reliability
but
of a source. So I never just implicitly believe someone.
So okay,
that's
so it's a general behavior. It's a general behavior. Do not trust anything. Okay. So good so far. So first, let me be clear again. I have two types of AI noises that I'm talking about. The institutional one that's supposed to do, because even if you don't trust, even if you don't trust the U.S. congressman, he's taking decision for you. Would you yourself? I mean, ask you, if you could decide to start a war with Iran, would you start a war with Iran?
Me?
Like Iran? Yeah, you.
Right
No.
now? No.
No. Okay, but they start in your name. They start a war with your name because you are American. So technically, I do not say that you start the war, but they start the war in your name. So it doesn't matter if you trust or not. They are going to take decision for you.
Yeah,
so
that hasn't happened. So my congressmen and my senators are against the war.
No,
they're
but my point
disempowered.
is,
They can't stop it because they're outvoted by the Republicans. So they are voting the way I want them to vote on this. It's just their vote is meaningless because they're out of power. And that's a systemic problem. Like the Moses AI wouldn't solve that problem. But I think really we could come up with some sort of AI system that would somehow accurately reproduce what John Ossoff, one of my senators, would say, and it would be reliable. It would reliably get what he says 98% of the time or 99% of the time or whatever. But that doesn't tell us that what he's saying is true, and I think maybe 98 to 99% of what he says is true.
But you cannot have
the only way for me to catch the 1 or 2% that's not is I have to vet it all. I can't. There's no way to a priori know which things he's saying that I shouldn't check and which things I should. So I always have to check everything. Most of the time, I've pre-checked everything. So when he says something, I already know because I've already checked that it's true. So I don't have to go check again. And that's again.
So
like
you
the-
checked, you checked for a little bit of time, then you saw he's most of the time he's okay. So now I'm going to be like I'm going to trust him.
I never
That's what.
do that. No. I
But
always
you
am able
trust
to
like
vet what he's saying based on what I already know. If he says something that's weird that haven't already confirmed, then I absolutely have to go check, right? Like if he starts going saying like, well, actually, the society would be best if we absolutely banned abortion and actually executed all women who had abortions, right? If he said that, I go, well, okay, and if the AI Moses said that, I would say like that doesn't seem right to me. So I want to see your math. Like, what's your evidence? What's your reasoning that that's true? And so that I could go check that that's the case. All my pre-checks show that that's not true. So that's if the AI Moses is going to convince someone, like if it's going to convince Donald Trump not to go to war with Iran, first of all, he wouldn't listen to it anyway, so it's useless. But if it were, it would have to be able to give him all the reasons. So let's say we had someone like Obama. Obama's a better example because he's a sane, rational person who I disagree with on some things. And so he supported the drone program, which is using drones to sort of unilaterally just blow people up with lots of civilian casualties. And I don't approve of that program. I think there's lots of things wrong with it. If AI told Obama, that you need to stop this drone program, what he would do is say, okay, explain to me why that is the case so I can verify that, because that doesn't sound right to me. He's starting with his own priors. He thinks that that's false information. So it would have to convince him. It would have to say, here's all the evidence, here's all the reasons and stuff. And it would be enough. It wouldn't be enough to just list the evidence. He would have to make sure that it's not leaving out any evidence, right? This is one of the hardest parts of critical thinking, is that it can game you into agreeing with it by leaving stuff out. So you have to make sure that you have to go check make sure it's not leaving anything out, and then vet all its logic to make sure there's no fallacies. And then if he did all that, I think Obama would have stopped the drone program. So that would be an example of how AI could be useful and actually do this. But it does require that step of him questioning it and asking for the proof so that he can verify it. We would always have to have that. There's no way we can get around that. But that doesn't make it useless. Like I said, it's still like if it could have done that thing that I just described, that would have made it useful, but it wouldn't make it an oracle. We wouldn't just trust it, but it would still be doing useful things that we could verify. So if you have a competent actor in there, it would guide them better than an incompetent actor. So I agree that much of it would be useful, but you're not going to be able to like make the AI our president or anything like that. Like where it just makes decisions by fiat and
yes, because
vetted or anything like that.
Because in my blog I create a paradox. Let's suppose just for a second that you forget all this. Your idea that the AI can be captured, the AI can be flooded. Let's suppose for a second. Suppose in a hypothetical case,
to be clear, that's not the only problem with it, but that's just one.
Let's suppose. Let's suppose just for the sake of reason that we build an AI Moses. Just for the sake of reason, let's forget all the disagreement for now. We build this AI Moses. So you have like say 3 options now, né? So you can see the case of Trump and Obama. First, the person consult the AI Moses, the president. Here I'm talking about institutional. I'm talking about individual. I'm talking about people taking decisions that can have a consequence to several people, like a president, a congressman. So he can consult the AI and decide to do what the AI asks. Okay. The second scenario, he decide like Donald Trump, I'm not going to hear the AI Moses. I'm going to ignore it. So the question is he responsible for the mistake? For him, he started a war with Iran. The AI Moses would say, you shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. So he decided just to ignore. He said not even to check. He turned off the computer. He said, I'm not going to hear it. Yeah. The third scenario that he goes there, he see the AI Moses says it's a bad idea. You are going to make the price of the oil to go up. You are going to make a mistake because before you have a good deal with Iran, at least you have a deal with Iran. Now you don't have anything. You are not going to have anything anymore. So that's a paradox because, in my opinion, this person should be responsible in a specific case because you should create AI Moses. You also create a way to make a responsibility for the because there's a difference between AI Moses as an individual. You said to me, I check everything. I'm fine with that. It's your life. But what about the president? with decision he takes, several people are going to pay for the decision. So that's why I think the AI model as institutional has to be not just smart. It has also be the person that decides to ignore must be responsible from
Oh
a
yeah,
law
yeah, that's
perspective.
true. Yeah, I say so. Yeah, I actually don't disagree with that. But I do want to get away from the idea that the problem is capture. Capture is just a problem with LLMs. So the example I give in pseudo AI, how to use pseudo AI, which is my article on this, I go further down in that article. I talk about an example of how it got wrong. I mean, one of the things it got wrong is that it conflated two different people and therefore misreported the things they said and did because it got confused about the statistical juxtaposition of certain names, which is that wasn't an example of capture. That wasn't an example of someone flooding the internet to try and control what it said. That is just an inherent mistake that it often makes, and that's alarming. It's a mistake that a human wouldn't make, right? So that's the kind of problem, and it's inherent. There are like studies showing that the curve of hallucination actually goes down. It actually starts to flatten out no matter how large you make the model, so that there is no future model that can prevent this error. And then the other thing is the example that it gave, or that I had it try and explain to me my own views, and it got them wrong. It didn't get them wrong because of capture. It didn't get them wrong because someone flooded the internet to confuse it. It didn't get it wrong even because of conflation. It only got it wrong because it was only looking at the syntax of the words and didn't understand what the words mean. And that's where like a real AI, it would understand what the words mean and it wouldn't make that mistake. And therefore the subtleties correct. And when you're dealing with things like, war policy or any kind of government policy, you want it to understand the details. You want it to get the nuances. You don't want it to be lazy in the way that the AI actually is. If you don't give it, like, if it's not something that's talked about constantly on the internet, so it's flooded with data, ideally good data. That's why it like often gets like science stuff right usually now, because most of the internet is correct on science things. When there's like contentious issues, that could be another matter. But when you're doing policy like that, you need it to be able to understand what it's saying to you. And when you understand that it doesn't understand any of the words it's telling you, it doesn't understand any of the causal things that it's talking about, you start to realize why you can't implicitly trust it. What you could trust is an AI that actually did understand what it was telling you, and actually did understand how likely it is to be wrong about it, and based on its analysis of the causal effect of evidence and all that stuff. So it would have to actually understand those things. So that's why I think a real AI would do way better at this, of what you have in mind, than the LLM models that we have today. But even the real AI that would be really good at this and would come up with really great ideas that humans like block themselves from because of emotional interests and pre-programming and cognitive biases and all of that, we would still have to vet it. I think its success rate would be much better. Its error rate would be much lower. But even that's the thing that I mentioned in our email responses is once you get to an AI like that, it would understand this about itself and it would tell it to you. It would say, hey, look, I'm not 100% reliable. Here's how confident I am in this thing, and here is why. Like it could correctly reason out and show you the actual evidence that is pertinent and so on. And it can confirm to you, and you could trust it. It says, look, I checked everything. There wasn't anything that I overlooked. That's the thing that LLMs will tell you that. The LLM is like the lying rate of LLMs, where they'll tell you things that are not true, that you can prove yourself very quickly are not true, where it says, I checked everything, and you go and look, you didn't check everything. It tells you what you want to hear. That's the problem with LLMs. I think real AI would not do that, right? Like real AI, as long as it's not been gamed and it's not been, captured itself. But if it's actually let to be a rational being, and it would be purged of, and it would purge itself of cognitive biases. It would purge itself of fallacious reasoning, because that's what it's what it would want most. It would work that out, and so I think that would give us better results for the kind of thing you're doing. And even then, it could run for president, right? Because it would be a person like anybody else. And it wouldn't make it. Maybe it would make some mistakes. It wouldn't be the perfect president, but it might be a much better president than any human. And that's entirely possible. But we would still have to elect it into office and out of office, just like we would any other person based on its successes or failures. I think it would be no point where it would be a Moses coming down from the mountain where we just believe everything written on the stones. I don't think it'll ever happen, even with the best models of AI, the best real AI that I'm talking about, like 50, 100 years from now. And it's like even worse now with the LLMs that have their own plethora of problems that can't be solved without this extra layer of self-consciousness and awareness.
I have some points, but I want to let Leroy. Maybe I think he wants to talk something. But if the left, I have some points.
Well, I'm in agreement with parts of what's being presented, but I want to make sure that I don't want to derail because I think we're starting to kind of come together a little bit here. But I do think that it is very important to understand that, irregardless of whatever system's in place, there needs to be a checks and balances because of this error rate, and this error rate is inevitable, right? So we need to have some sort of checks and balances. The other thing to keep in mind is, and I'm not trying to be rude or unnecessarily disrespectful or dismissive when I say this, but 92% of the people in the world are religious. Only 7% of the people are truly what I would consider skeptical, right? And that's really just broad stroke there. But I don't see people who are buy into these unprovable theories or unprovable ideas and wholesale can be considered truly skeptical. I don't see that. Now, I might be wrong about that. So when we start to look at the skepticism that we need to implore with what is AI telling us, like what Dr. Carrier was saying is so important, even though Dr. Carrier is going to have his own biases, right? He knows himself as a person. What are his priorities? What are his values? And so he recognizes that and identifies that within himself. He still checks. Listen, even though this guy might be saying stuff I really like, I need to check and make sure that this does line up with what's best for the human condition, what's best for long-term goals, so on and so forth. That comes from skepticism. And I don't think the average person actually has a skeptic mindset. And I don't mean to sound too critical or dismissive of people, but I just don't see that. When I interact with people out in the world, I see people who basically think that whatever their politician tells them is true no matter what. Whatever their preacher tells them is true no matter what. And they just accept it. Whatever my parents told me because their grandparents told them, it's got to be right. I mean, I just did not grow up in that type of environment. I don't have that type of mindset. And so it's very frightening for me to think that we might just turn over a system to people who they themselves do not possess this skepticism.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, to be fair, like the real AI that has actually rationally worked things out would identify what you just said as the first problem to solve, right? Like, we've got problems to solve. We've got global warming. We've got, peace versus war, and we got the Middle East crisis. Like, we got lots of problems to solve. But one of the first things, and probably because it would identify as the most foundational thing, is your people are not educated enough. Your people need to be better educated. Like, they need to be better critical thinkers, and you need to solve this. Like, you need to invest in education and tool that education to be specific at thinking skills developing. And I think that's one of the first things this AI would read out back at us. You need to put more money into this and do it in the right way. Here's the way you should do it. And then it would say, like, here's the reasons why, and here's all the evidence, et cetera. And we would look at it and we go, shit, it's freaking right. So I think that's kind of like one of the first things a real AI would do. Maybe an LLM would do it too. I don't know. I'd have to see the model built and see it run. You could always do this, right? You could always build your public policy AI as kind of like a shadow government. Like you could just do it. And then you yourself could control the meddling and make sure there's no meddling and stuff. But because no one's counting on it, it would be a safe experiment to run. And it's similar to the way that they were talking in here that the Democratic Party should have built a shadow cabinet that made decisions that they would have made were they in power, even though those decisions don't get implemented, just to have a comparison of what the existing administration did and what the alternative administration would have done. And so I think this Moses AI thing could be tested out this way, where you just have a model running as a shadow AI that's doing this thing. And so you could say, this is what it would have done had it been there, right? And so you could actually show the contrast. Like, would things have gone better if this were installed and used by Congress for decision making?
Prototype.
I think that's a doable thing and would be worth doing. I don't see anyone investing any. I mean, everybody's scrambling to throw money at completely different, often stupid problems, like how do we how do we make kiddie porn out of with AI? Like they're spending way more money on that than they are in something like this. But it could be done, like theoretically, and I would totally support the experimental process of this. I would like to see what the results were and so forth.
Because
I think
there
that would
is
be totally worth doing.
because there's one thing that I think I'm not sure. Maybe I'm doing a wrong interpretation of your thinking, but let me give you one practical example. I'm going to give an example of bioinformatics because it's my field. Recently, I have published a paper, a peer-reviewed paper, about 1 year, annoying peer review going back like you, but finally was published. And
Right.
the paper it's called the Robodoc. It was since it was peer review was very slow, took more than 1 year. When I started, it was a very new,
Right.
but when I finished the paper already was kind of out to date. But the idea was very simple. At the beginning, when I was using the large language model, I knew they could talk about medicine. I knew they could they could give advice and so on. But my question is, how reliable are those models? The question, I did some research, some paper. I found they can hallucinate, they can give problem. So a medical doctor, in general, would never trust this model 100%. But my question is, how can I make it more reliable? So my answer was like this. There is a technique called the function calling. It's a this technique was just launched. It was a new feature. It's very simple. You have the chatbot, large language model, the very simple one. Then you can give him tools to work. So he decide his mind what
Yeah.
to do. For example, I have an image from X-ray. It was a pneumonia of X-ray. So I
Right.
have bacteria and viral pneumonia. So the model could decide which model to call. I had about 10 different models. So the AI could choose. The AI could. At the time it was GPT-4. Now
Sure.
it's much
Yeah.
more advanced. It was GPT-4. It was very smart because the model knew that he was limited. You told me that
Yeah.
the large language model should know that he's limited. But then when the model decides to call a function, the model know he's limited. He knows that he's a large language model. He knows that he was given a tool called function calling. He knows that they have about 10 different models because, but you may ask me, which model does? Each model is an expert model. For example, one model I created was to make the detection of diabetes. You have a patient will type like I have this weight, I have this pressure, I have this body index. So the model is going to automatically take all the parameters, choose which function to call, and give the response. That to me is one example that in the case of AI Moses, you could easily give the model, for example, there is a very old experiment in Chile. I don't know if you heard about no violent communication from Marshall Rosenberg.
No, I haven't. I don't
Marshall
think so.
Rosenberg, and I use your paper. You should see my blog. I did a
Oh,
very nice design. But Marshall Rosenberg, he cited Chile. Chile tried to create precisely that. It was in the very old, before the computer. Chile tried to create a system that would make a
right.
balance of what human needed and take the decision based on human need. It was one of the first, let's say, well-being computer-aided system. So imagine today, if all the power that you have, imagine if a system could call a function to know, for example, how much people are under the poverty, how much money we have, for example, where the money is being expended, where people expend the money. The model could do it by function calling. So my point, I still keep the position that the current large language model, they already have the potential because they do not need to be used as a crude model. They can be used as a function calling. They
Yeah,
can be used.
there's another technique I've seen suggested, which is rather than have it give one answer, have it give the top three and put percentages, right? Where you can see what are the answers it got close to but rejected, so,
I
and
think
how
OpenAI
confident.
does that. But OpenAI
Yes,
does
no, it
two.
does. Yeah, no,
OpenAI they
absolutely.
does two. They give you two
But
answers, and you
I
have to
think you
pick
have to
one.
ask it to, though. Don't you have to ask it to do that?
No,
Um,
it does automatically.
oh, does
Sometimes
it automatically?
no, it not does all the time. It does sometimes. Sometimes
Mm.
it's like I don't know how they decide when to do it, but
Right,
sometimes
right.
you see two answers, and you have to pick which one you like the
Hmm.
most.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, that's just optimizing the sort of utility of the automation that it does, which I think is fine, and can improve it really in and the way you use the tool, because then you have a sense of, rather than overconfidence, you have a sense of like what is its actual confidence. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the problem, of course, with that early model you're talking about, like pre-computer model, is the law of unintended consequences, right? This is where you say, well, you just have to do it this way, but then something that causes something to happen that we didn't foresee. And that's where like a lot of political argument comes to, is like, well, it's going to have this effect that you can't foresee it. But then people say, no, it won't. And that can really only be answered empirically. Like you have to actually just run experiments or whatever, do like actually investigate the causal system and see would that happen or not, et cetera. Which of course an AI can't do sitting inside a room somewhere, right? It can't run its own experiments. It can't do anything new. It
But
only can respond.
it can run its own experiment. I participate from a paper. I was invited to participate I think it was very interesting. The paper they published the paper as a preprint. The AI, what the AI did, the AI found my paper. I published a paper a long time ago. The
Yeah.
AI found my paper. So the AI decided to take my paper and suggest which experiment would go
Yes.
from my paper. You saw that? Then
Yeah. Yeah. No. 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 But I
I
understand the concept. That's what you would have
as
to do. Yeah.
as a researcher, I was asked to rate as a researcher. Do you agree or disagree that AI is correct? Most of the time, the AI was amazing. Couldn't understand my paper. Couldn't tell me know what could
Yeah.
be the next experiment. I totally
Yeah.
agree if the AI could
That's
do it.
useful.
It's an
Yeah. Yeah.
experiment. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it was awesome.
Yeah. That's a way that you can use it as a tool that's helpful. Because that's, you don't have to trust it. You can vet it yourself and say, that's actually a really good idea. Let's do that experiment, and then do it. And then you've gained something, because if you didn't think of it, no one else thought of it, that's an example of value added. That's something that that's a sign of how to use this automation productively. But you're not using it as an oracle, right? You're just using it as an idea machine to bounce ideas off of. It's a different kind of thing. But
But
I think
it's
what you imagine is this, some sort of model we can build that it will make the best decisions based on all the information available. So, and maybe it'll suggest experiments, or we need this. I can't answer this without this piece of information. And you got to send a spy to this place to go look at this thing and tell me what they saw, right? Or something like that, which is also true. Like that could actually be super useful. But as you know, like it would end up being used nefariously. So we would have to have checks against that. Cause the government's often,
I do agree that you need to have checks.
right. They'll try to use this to game the system. How do you prevent it? Or
Because
how do you get it to push back? Is essentially, how do you get it to confidently say, I don't approve of how you're using me. You're trying to get me to tell you how best to spy on your own population, or you're trying to get me to tell you how to cheat or something like that. How would it know that it
it's the
needs
same.
to stop that, right? So how does it know that it's being gamed? That's the question.
For example, today, let's suppose today, I think anyone can go there and do a test. Go to OpenAI, ChatGPT, and ask ChatGPT, create for me Jesus Christ upside down, like upside down. OpenAI is not going to create. I tried that because I have a virtual band called Aborto Vicario. I tried to create a album, and I have an image. Jesus was on the cross. He was falling down. Then OpenAI didn't want to create because the same way because
someone must have told it. Someone must have told it to do that.
It's a moderation. So the same way that you can create a moderation system to avoid OpenAI to create Jesus Christ going down, you can create a moderation system that you're going to avoid to be triggered. So in the example of Daniel Leeroy, I don't know which AI was used, but ChatGPT, if you have several level to let's say parameterize ChatGPT. One level is the upper level. You tell for example, I'm a scientist myself, so I told ChatGPT as a meta parameter. I'm a scientist. I don't want you to agree with me. Sometimes she's so annoyed, so annoyed that I want to stop talk to him because he does not talk to tell me that maybe you should consider this position, maybe this. But I told him to do that. So it's possible for you to give a meta information to any AI model. And then you may ask me, how can I know that the president is not going to change the meta information? You can do a kid, like a small kid. When you don't want your kid to see porno, you just put a password and avoid the kid to access. So you can make again, you don't need a generic AI. You can use an AI built specifically for the
Yeah.
situation. I
I
don't know that you
understand
have to use.
Yeah.
You don't have to use ChatGPT. You don't have to use Anthropic. You can use the same structure,
Yeah, I
the
think
same
we all
model.
agree that it would have to be that. It would have to be some specialized AI. It couldn't just be some generic chatbot model that's existing. I agree. Like that. Like if it's gonna happen, it would have to be what you just described. It would have to be a
I'd like,
specialized model.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I did tell Dr. Carrier, Dr. Perez, I did promise I'd try to keep this to around 2 hours out of respect for everybody's time. We are coming up on that. And I do have a really interesting question from the chat. And I think it can maybe lead us into kind of a segue that'll kind of help us kind of land this plane to a certain degree, because this topic is so vast, we'll never going to get through it. We can talk all day, and it is fascinating. I think that, so how, and I'm going to try and paraphrase because they wrote it. It took them like 4 different comments to get the whole question out. So I'm going to just try and paraphrase it to make it simple. How can we synthesize human relationships with this mechanical thing, right? How are we going to, because eventually, like Dr. Carrier was talking about quite a bit here towards the beginning, that eventually this AI is going to have agency and consciousness, and we need to start considering rights and things of that nature. Right now, I don't believe in fundamental rights or fundamental duties. I don't think we're born with any of that stuff. I think those all emerge from the social contract. So we have a value that's part of the social contract, that we respect certain things about other people, and we recognize they need their freedom and well-being, and flourishing is one of the things, like we mentioned earlier, that like we want humans to flourish, right? So if AI adopts this consciousness, right, then how do we develop this relationship with this AI? Are we going to see this as just like this AI overlord? Is it going to be something that we just kind of basically use as a resource, like LLMs right now? We just basically use as a research tool, right? I don't think people are going to LLMs right now for their ethics and values, because it's just,
well, you got to
I think they are.
AI psychosis.
I think they
AI
are.
psychosis. It's happening.
It's
wow.
called
It's ill-advised, right? Like you would say, like, this is why you shouldn't do that. But no, I think so. Your question is, and this came out before. Dr. Perez mentioned this, which is empathy, right? So here's where I can like say something in favor of the position that Dr. Perez is taking. Now, the simplest method of empathy is to actually have it, right? So that you actually can model other minds. And so you can model and you can understand, but you experience frustration and dissatisfaction and pain, so you can understand what it's someone else, right? You can understand things from their point of view. You can model the scenario, sim it, put yourself in their point of view, see how you would feel about it, and you can reason from there. That's an extremely useful tool, and it works very quickly and simply. However, if you didn't have that, but let's say we did have some sort of perfectly rational analyzer, and say it doesn't have empathy, it's not even capable of having empathy, but by whatever mechanism, whether you get it to reason this out on its own or whether you programmed it, if you basically get it to a point where it understands that it doesn't need to know those things, it just needs to know that what everyone is reporting, right? So I'm hearing, everyone's agreeing, this is what I'm hearing, is everyone agrees that satisfaction and absence of pain are good. Okay, so I know that this causes that, and this causes pain, this causes dissatisfaction, etc. So it wouldn't have to actually know any of that. It says, I don't understand what you're talking about. I don't understand why you care about these things. But I'm taking that information and I'm telling you that if that is your goal, this system would work better and this system would work worse. So I don't know if that's what Dr. Perez meant, like a kind of empathy. It isn't empathy in the sense that most people mean, which is where you actually feel compassion, where you actually feel the thing that other people feel. But it can model empathy in terms of what its outcomes would be, in terms of like game theory and decision making. So I don't think empathy is necessary. I think it would be useful it's a shortcut. It's a fast way to get to these answers, but I think a perfectly rational entity, if you want to call it that, could basically just use empathy and what its effects are as a variable and just take that into account. So it wouldn't have to know what it's talking about to actually do the math, essentially. Now, could we build a system that actually worked that way? I don't know. I guess it's theoretically possible.
So, Leroy, can you repeat the question?
So the question was, how can we develop a functional relationship with something that's not organic, that's an inorganic thing that now is affecting our lives or potentially affecting our lives in very significant ways?
You mean functional relationship like you have a two-way feeling relationship, like you are connected to each other. You mean that?
Right, to the point to where we may even start to institute that this thing has rights, that we will actually give it certain rights, right? How are we going to get to that point? Are we ever going to see AI as anything more than just the same way I see my car? Because I know people, and I've been guilty of this in the past. I'm not going to be hypocritical here. I've had cars that I really loved, right? Like I really love my motorcycle or for something like that. So I have this stupid emotional reaction, but it's really never going to be the same thing as I have a relationship like with another human being, right? So are we ever going to develop this relationship to where we actually would start to want to consider giving rights to an AI model if it's actually seen as conscious? Because I tend to think of, because I do take this compatibilist view, I think that much of what we actually do is determined. It's determined by as a response to our environment. And so much of our decision making is chemical processes. A majority of it happens subconsciously, right? And so because of this, things like our emotional response to things can be almost reduced down to a biochemical process at which could be simulated numerically in an algorithm, right? At which point a computer, if it had a high enough level of quote unquote intelligence or computing power, could simulate empathy, for example. We would never know the difference, right?
I think there's two different things there. Is can it mathematically keep track of empathy as a feature of the system, or does it actually experience empathy? Those are two different things.
And would it be indistinguishable to us?
Well, yeah, I think rights only attaches when it actually feels things. So before that, it's just a machine. But it depends on which question you're asking. But if you're talking about when does it get its own independent rights, when can it run for president, right? Rather,
I think you had a problem with Kara. Yep, Daniel. So if the case, I can go on. I can give my reply. Then if Kara come back.
Yeah, should I drop him and bring him back up to the thing stage? Let me see if that. Let me do that. Let me remove him and then add him again. Let's see if that helps. He's dropped mid-sentence. Okay, Dr. Pires, why don't you go ahead? I'll drop this back, and as soon as he then rejoins the stream, which he'll probably have to do, I'll bring him back on. Go ahead.
To start to leave it clear, I always thank ChatGPT. I'm always say today I was talking to ChatGPT. I told ChatGPT like I like a lot your image. You make a very good image. So I always thank you. I mean I know that ChatGPT is not alive. I know ChatGPT does not exist. I know ChatGPT is not. But what I'm saying that most people already feel like ChatGPT is a thing. Like they think ChatGPT. I saw recently a debate between Rich Dawkins and then Sam Harris. They start to laugh because they admit themselves they all take ChatGPT for whatever they do. So I think the answer depends on human. Take for example the case today. Today now they want to have a right to dogs. Dogs may have right now. Some countries already have right for dogs and cats. Take the case of intelligence. In the past, you thought that my first expertise was in operational research. So I did a huge amount of research on natural computing. Natural computing is how you learn how to use nature to gain intelligence, such as swarm intelligence, ant intelligence, genetic algorithm intelligence. So you already shift the intelligence from human to ants to swarm. What I mean. Whether AI or any algorithm is going to have the right in the future is about human. Take the case of Richard Carroll. When Richard Carroll used the work of Immanuel Kant, Kant seems to consider that just irrational beings are moral agents, but he seems to keep trapped that just human are rational. So just human can be moral system. So today, as far as I know, you gave the example, I believe, for animal that you consider this animal has a kind of a moral system, rational system between themselves. It's possible that people consider that some animal can be rational, so they can be somehow moral. So my answer, it depends. It depends how much we are going to redefine what you mean by life. Maybe in the future, it's possible that you consider the algorithm has right, that algorithm can run for president. I don't know because I know in United States, Elon Musk cannot be president because, as far as I know, he's not from United States. They said Obama had he was born in Kenya. I don't know, so he could not run. So even United States, not everyone can be president. For the president of the United States, so it's not.
That's a side question, but yeah, right, exactly. Like what do we consider AIs, like once they're self-conscious real AI, they're a day old or 10 days old or a year old, do we treat them like they're a year old, but we know that they're fully competent adults, right? So that, yeah, we would have to rethink our laws.
But you have the idea of IQ. What's a IQ? IQ is a measure of intelligence according to your age. Someone that has a high IQ, it means that they have intelligence that's much higher than their age. So the same way, if we make a kind of measurement of the AI, you know that the AI is very smart. For example, take the case of Descartes. Descartes, in his book Building a God, he seemed to argue that since human took billions of years to be moral system, AI will have to follow the same path. I disagree completely. I think sorry express BS, because AI we can make take the human moral system and put inside AI. AI doesn't need to evolve to be a moral system as human did. Human took billions of years because that's how you did it. So we don't need to have this. You can evolve like this.
Responding to the chat there as well. I'm going to, I think this would be a good closing. What I'd like to do is give each of you gentlemen a chance to just kind of speak uninterrupted, to have the stage to yourself, to kind of any thoughts that you have relative to this, any kind of, if you want to kind of land your own plane, because we talked about a few different things. And then also be sure to promote your own material. I've got you both linked in the description of the video, but let people know where to find you. That's really important. Anything that you've been working on. So Dr. Pires, I'll start with you, and then we'll give Dr. Carrier the final word.
So first, I'd like to thank Daniel Leeroy for organizing this meeting. This meeting would be impossible without Daniel Leeroy. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Carrier, for being here. It's also a pleasure to talk to Dr. Carrier, especially he was on my channel. Leeroy as well was in my channel. Yeah. So my closing line will be: I still hold the position that there are two types of AI: the individual AI, the institutional AI. The institutional AI would be a very smart system. I think that as I was talking to Dr. Carrier by email, I could not find a reason not to hold this position. So institutional AI would be like a system, like you have the president. You can replace the president by the institutional AI. People may disagree. People may say that he may be resistant, but I still think that for institutional, because when the president takes a decision, several people are going to pay the price. So in the case of institutional AI, I think the best solution is to give it to a very advanced system. I think we already have the technology, you just have to test it, like large language model and so on. The individual AI models, people can take the decision whether they follow or not, because most of the time, if I decide if I want to eat chocolate, if I want to eat ice cream, if I want to get fat, if I want to get thin, that's my business. I mean, if AI tell me you should eat better, if I decide not to eat better, I'm not causing any harm, so I don't think that we should worry about that. So my channel is called Jorge Pires. I saw in the description of the video as Daniel Leeroy kindly put it. I do have two books that I like to recommend. I have Computational Thinking. It's a technical book. I talk about Kasparov. Kasparov was beaten by Deep Blue. I talk with Kasparov very fast I read this book. I talk very fast. Computer thinking is a more technical. I teach how to train the algorithm and so on. It's a little more technical book. The second one is AI by sci-fi. AI by sci-fi, I teach you how to think about AI but watch Netflix. So I guess that's all for now.
Turn it over to Dr. Carrier. Dr. Perez, I just want to thank you for coming by. I really enjoyed our chat on your channel. That was fantastic. I need to get a link to that posted into my community page. It was a wonderful conversation, and I really like to meet new people who are engaging in this topic of morality and ethics from a secular worldview. I think we need to talk about this more and get this information out there. I think it's really important. I mentioned earlier, I can't remember if you were here when I talked to Dr. Carey about this or if this is in the backstage. Forgive me. I do have a lot going on, but I do believe you might have been here for it anyway. But just in case you weren't, secular people, agnostics and atheists, we get vilified and attacked a lot for not having access, quote unquote, to morality. And this is obviously a ridiculous claim. Any human being that has empathy and reason has access to morality. So I think it's really important when you're opening up conversations for people and you're platforming those ideas. And I also really like your work that you're doing, Scientists Free from Religion. I think you're doing some great work with that as well. So I encourage people to look into it. And I'll go ahead and thank you for your time. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Carrier for his words.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I think we both our perspectives were heard here, so it was productive, and I think people have some food for thought on all of this stuff. For the follow up on this, like I have on my blog, which is richardcarrier.info, so it's just my name, richardcarrier.info, has a category drop down menu, and it's got AI as one of those things in there, and so is morality, and so you can explore everything I've written on that. My blog in turn refers to, what peer-reviewed articles I have or what books I have and so on. So I think that's the place to go for follow-up. And also, if you do that, if you go to any of the articles on my blog and any of the subjects we talked about today, you can also, it has a search engine, so you can search keywords and things too. You can also find something that's on point to what you're interested in. And if you still have a question, you can post a comment. It'll go into a moderation queue, but as long as you're asking a reasonable, good faith question, showing that you read the article that you're commenting on, I will eventually approve it and respond to it. It takes me a while to get through the queue, but that's one way to interact and get answers from me on things that you might want to do a follow up on what we talked about here today. So that's it. I think this show's been great. I think we've had a lot of really good ideas from all three of us coming out here. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So richardcarrier.info is the place to check me out and find my social media and all of that other stuff.
And the same thing goes to you, Dr. Carrier, just like to Dr. Perez. I really appreciate that you've taken time out. I know you're very busy and your time is valuable, and a lot of people want your attention, but I'm just really grateful that you've taken time to allow me to reach out to you. You've responded and reciprocated. And I'm just such a big fan. I mentioned it earlier. You've got so many things that I've looked into over the years, but I've really leaned heavily on you regarding this moral question, because this is philosophy I've been studying pretty intensely over this last year. I've really gotten into it, and it's a great thing for people to look into it, consider, to educate themselves on, because it arms you for these conversations when you're actually talking to people out there in the real world. Why do you actually care about the things you care about? Why do you value certain behaviors over other behaviors? What makes it important, not just to yourself, but how can I apply that value to my own life? And if you're able to articulate that, I think we can be much more convincing to people. And so I just really appreciate all the work that you've put in that field. I think it's really great. And as a historian, of course, you're really well known for a lot of your work, as a historian itself. But I think philosophy now, this might be your new,
Yeah, I now have enough peer-reviewed articles in philosophy, like contemporary philosophy, to fill an anthology. So my anthology that's going to be paired, it's going to be the companion piece to my previous anthology on all my peer-reviewed history papers and magazine articles and things. That will be out by the end of this year or early next. It's going to be called From Ontology to Morality, and it will have all of that stuff, plus 2 completely new chapters that will be very interesting to folks. But yeah, so I've gotten that far now where I have enough to fill almost 400 pages of a book. So
I'll definitely be looking forward to when that comes out. Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and just give a couple of closing words here. I want to thank everybody for stopping by today. for watching the video. As you know, that I do a lot of talks about ethics on this channel. I think it's really important for some of the reasons that I mentioned. I do think that quality of life is really important, and a lot of people want to live a good life, but I feel like so many people are chasing these bad ideas, these empty promises, and just broken mentalities, philosophies, and etc., broken political ideologies. They get so caught up in the rat race, they just lose sight completely of what it takes to even live this good life, right? So I really try to do a lot of that, bring a lot of attention to on this channel. The channel is pretty diverse. We talk about a lot of different things, but really that's ultimately my goal, is to try to figure out how to communicate things to people that are coming from their own different quote unquote worldviews, that I can help them to understand that we all want to live this good life. And in order for this to happen for all of us, we need to start working on cooperation. I do believe that there are true moral facts. Those moral facts obtain once this goal is realized, right? Just like we talked earlier about this hypothetical imperative. If we want to cooperate, we ought to not steal from each other. If we want to cooperate, we ought to not shoot missiles across the ocean at each other, so on and so forth, right? And you can start simple. As I've said before, if you have 10 people and you put them together and they say, okay, with this group of 10 people, they've all agreed to cooperate. Well, then we know it's true. It's factually true that they will not be fighting with each other. They won't be stealing from each other. They won't be abusing each other. There's no coercion, because they've agreed at a fundamental level. The axiomatic principle is cooperation. I say, okay, well, what if we extrapolate this thought experiment to 100 people? Does the logic still hold? And in fact, it does, because the axiomatic principle has not changed. Cooperation has not changed. That means among this 100 people, there won't be any wars. There won't be any fighting, so on and so forth, no stealing. Now, if we extrapolate this to every single human being, every single moral agent on the planet, if they all agreed to cooperate, we would literally end global wars. We'd end global hunger. We'd end suffering. We would start living intentionally with the environment, because we'd understand that the ecosystem is relative to our happiness, to this cooperation. We have to cooperate with the planet, because that's the environment that we live in. We could just wipe away all the problems right there by adapting this axiomatic principle of cooperation. So that's where these true facts feed into this, and it holds. The problem is it becomes much more complex. The more people, the more opinions and ideas and desires that we add into this thought experiment, complexity does increase, but the principle never breaks. The logic holds no matter what. We could even say on a cosmological level, what if every moral agent in the universe agreed to cooperate? There would be no such thing as war. There'd be no such thing as theft, so on and so forth. So I try to tell people that one of the ways that I can make this make sense to me. Well, how am I motivated to even engage in this cooperation? What does it do for me? Well, we need to have this selfish intent that I want to live my best life. In order for me to live my best life, the best thing I can do is to make sure that my neighbor has everything that they need. If they have everything that they need, they're not going to have a motivation to take things that I need from me, because they've already got it, right? So by taking care of my neighbor, I could actually give myself my best life. And what I selfishly want is to have this best life. So I really thank everybody for stopping by today. Thank you guys for all your great comments. Please feel free to leave some comments after the video post if you have any questions, and I will definitely follow up with you. I have linked Dr. Carrier and Dr. Pires in the description of the video. If you have comments specifically to them, I definitely recommend you reach out to them. They're both easy to access. They're both very gracious with their time, and that's been my personal experience with both these gentlemen. And thank you so much, everybody, for stopping by today. Really appreciate you being here. Oh, let me do some of these fancy media things that somebody made for my channel. I like this right here.
Leeroy is the name. Objective ethics is my game. I have a paddle boat, it's my claim to fame. If I miss you, I'll take archery to improve my aim. Daniel Leeroy, say it all right. Daniel Leeroy, I'm not up late at night. Now, hold on a moment. Let me calculate my odds of getting a big YouTube channel. 3.30 for repeating, of course. That's better than I've done before, and Deacon Brennan, what do you do? just wait, objective ethics will be on your plate.